of the Open Public Meetings Act and state regulations governing remote public meetings. The notice included the time, date, and location of the meeting and clear and concise instructions for accessing the meeting via computer, smart device, or telephone. The agenda and all related documents and other materials were posted electronically on Princeton's meeting portal and made available for download at least 48 hours prior to the meeting.
Great, thank you very much. And can you please call the roll?
Ms. Perron-Lambros?
Here.
Ms. Niedergang?
Here.
Mr. Cohen?
Here.
Ms. Fraga?
Here.
Mr. Williamson?
Here.
Ms. Sachs?
Here.
Mayor Limpert?
Here. So we have several sets of minutes on the agenda tonight, which reflects both the high volume of meetings that council has been having and also a tremendous amount of work by the clerk's department to stay current. So I do want to thank the clerk's office and then also ask if there's a motion to move these sets of minutes in block. Moved by Ms. Fraga, seconded by Ms. Niedergang. Are there any corrections to any of these minutes? All in favor?
Aye.
And
Any
thank you
opposed?
to the clerk for turning over such a high volume so quickly. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, it's great, and the public appreciates it too. So, all right. So the minutes passed unanimously, and now we come to announcements. And I'd like to start with Council President Cohen. Any announcements this evening?
I don't have any tonight.
And Councilman Fraga, any announcements?
No announcements tonight, Mayor. Thank you.
Councilman Williamson, any announcements?
None, Mayor.
Okay. Councilwoman Niedergang?
No announcements tonight.
I should have just asked if anyone has any announcements. Ms. Sachs or Ms. Perron-Lambros, announcements from either one of you?
No announcements.
Okay.
Thanks for the personal touch, Mayor. Appreciate
it. Okay, so then we come to proclamations, and I'm not going to read these verbatim, but the first proclamation is, but actually both of these proclamations are ones that we do every year. The first one is for Small Business Saturday, which is the just a reminder that you shouldn't do all your holiday shopping on Black Friday. Remember our small businesses. I will say there's a special spin on it this year, which is to not wait till November 28th to start your holiday shopping. There are restrictions because of COVID. There can only be 50% capacity in any of our stores. And we want to make sure this holiday season is so important for our merchants, and they're really stepping up. They have some really wonderful gifts for people to get, but we need to spread out the shopping season so that we're not all trying to cram in the store. So I've heard that, you know, they're encouraging people midweek is best, Monday through Thursday if you're able to, but certainly try to shop early. But you're also welcome to shop on Small Business Saturday. A lot of the businesses call ahead of time. They can sometimes shop for you and have things ready for curbside pickup. And the next proclamation is for Communities of Light Day. That's going to be on December 7th this year. And this is an annual event put on by Women's Space to bring attention to domestic violence. And you can check the Women's Space website for information on how to light a luminary at your home to show your support for the important work that they do. Okay, now we come to public comment, and this is for if anybody has a comment for an item that is not already on the agenda. And I'm going to just read through some of the instructions on how to make a comment. So I can't see you. So if you can raise your hand if you'd like to make a comment, and that's raising your virtual hand. So if you're viewing this on a computer, you can check and see, depending on what platform you're on, how to raise your hand. If you're listening in by phone, you press *9 in order to indicate that you'd like to make a comment. And let's see. Okay, I think that's a good enough of instruction. So I see 2 people have their hand up, and we'll start with Kip Cherry. Hi, Kip, go ahead.
Okay, great. Is it possible for me to share? I have a couple of pictures to show, if that's okay.
I don't think so, but if you send them in, we can include them in the, we can try to include them in the minutes.
Okay, I emailed them to you earlier today.
Okay.
I'm Kip Cherry. While we cope with COVID-19, there's another issue where we need to take immediate action. The spotted lanternfly, the SLF, is an invasive species from Asia that has arrived in Princeton and needs immediate action. Right now, we need to be scraping SLF egg masses off of trees and cutting down the invasive tree of heaven. Here are more details. Among other trees and bushes, the SLF zeroes in on fruit trees and many shade trees. Apple, peach, and cherry trees, blueberries, grapes, walnut, maple, and oak trees, etc. When the SLF feeds on a host tree, it digests sap and releases a sticky honeydew waste that draws mold and other insects to the tree. This weakens the host and degrades the fruit, presenting a probability of major financial losses among locally grown fruits for which New Jersey is so well known, and reduction in the quality of life. 8 counties in New Jersey are currently under quarantine. Mercer is one of them. That means that anyone who leaves these counties should do a quick inspection to make sure that no SLFs or egg masses are residing on their vehicle. The most popular host for the SLF is the tree of heaven, the ailanthus tree, another invasive species that grows along roadways and lot edges. Key measures that can be taken against the SLF include cutting down the tree of heaven, scraping egg masses off of bark, and putting them into a jar of alcohol, which looks like a gray or sandy colored smear on the bark, and hanging SLF traps on the host trees. I understand from Taylor, Princeton's arborist, that Public Works has taken its own steps and has identified some places within town where the tree of heaven needs to be cut down. I should note that sumac looks a lot like the tree of heaven, but the tree of heaven has smooth leaf edges and it has a different kind of seeds that are winged. So you can, if you look carefully, you can see the difference. The adult SLF dies off in the fall after laying its eggs. The eggs survive the winter and hatch as nymphs in the spring, while the adult and becomes an adult. That's why destroying egg masses and the tree of heaven is so important this fall, because any egg-laying SLF right now is laying hundreds of eggs, so there will be a lot of nymphs that will then reproduce. So I just wanted to bring that up to you all because it's something that people can do right now in their own yards, and people are probably wondering what's going on and what these flies are. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Kip, for that information. And we can take that back to the Shade Tree Commission and maybe work on some information we can push out to the community as well. That'd be great. Ms. Niedergang?
I was just wondering, I think we've done something in the mayor's newsletter about that, haven't we?
We have, yes.
Maybe
It
be
was
worth repeating in the next week or so.
It was from a different season. And so I think the instructions, I mean, based on what Ms. Cherry is saying, it's like maybe the instructions for fall, winter are different than the instructions were for spring. So I think it's worth just checking. Ms. Prun-Lambros?
Yeah, I can take it back to the Shade Tree Commission and just make sure. I'm pretty sure we're pretty up to date. And I know that there's a section right now on the that invasive species. But if you want to send me that information, I think I did receive your email today, Kip, but we'll double check. Thank you.
Thanks. And next is Maria Huega. You should be able to speak now.
Thank you. Good evening. I'm following up on a previous item I brought up at the September 30th council meeting, I suggested that sub-grantees of the CDBG funds for COVID-related assistance be asked to make public and submit some basic demographic data of the households that are going to be helped, and that the data be reported to the Affordable Housing Board and or any other appropriate municipal agencies for their review. With whom should I follow up on these matters? Thank you.
Thanks for that. And that information, I think, is going to be required by HUD anyway, at least for the rental assistance piece. So there will be agreements coming to council. I'm hoping at our December 7th meeting, or at the latest, the December 14th meeting. And those reporting things can be put inside those contracts so that the contractors will be getting that information, reporting that information back to the municipality, and we can release it. Okay, are there any other comments on items that are not already on the agenda? Okay, thank you. Thank you for those comments. And now we come to reports. And the first report this evening is from our police chief, Chris Morgan. Hey, Chris.
Hi, Mayor. How are you?
Good, how are you?
Doing well. Good to see everyone. Hope everyone is doing well. We just have a few items I wanted to go over with everyone. I know you guys have a busy agenda tonight, but first, I just wanted to start off with going over the impact that the pandemic is having on the police department. Obviously, it's the forefront of everyone's minds. It still remains a major concern within the police department. It's our #1 priority to keep the police department healthy so that we can continue to provide services through the community. So just so you're aware of what we've done in taking measures to keep our officers safe and then anyone that we have contact with in the public, we're providing all the necessary protective equipment, the different types of masks, eye protection. We have screens set up within the police department to keep our officers separated if they need to come in and do some type of work together, whether it be reports. We've limited interaction within the police department itself during meal breaks, but temperature checks, they have to come in and do temperature checks, self-assessment logs on health screening. But probably the biggest thing that we've done so far, and this has been in, Mayor, you're in the meetings, the consultations with Jeff Grosser, the doctors, and the COVID status meetings that we have twice a week. And I got to tell you, Mayor, I'm just so thankful for those meetings. Jeff is absolutely fantastic in providing direction for the police department and having help us navigate the situation. We've made some modifications to our schedule. It's similar to what we did before. Without getting into the details of the schedule, we still have enough officers on patrol and available to assist the public and respond to calls, but it also allows us to ensure that any type of exposures or positive cases would not spread throughout the police department. And I say I'm very thankful for that because we've had some exposures within the police department. In fact, right now we have 4 officers that are quarantined. But thankfully, with the direction of that committee, we've been able to, like I said, keep everyone somewhat separated, and it's really limited a lot of the exposures within the police department. So that's something that we're always monitoring. And again, those meetings are helpful in so many ways. And again, I can't say enough about Jeff and his help that he's given to the police department. We're on the phone with him almost every day, and I know he's very busy. When you look at the call volume continues to remain low. If you look at the call volume in September, it's very similar to where we were back in May and June. The lowest obviously being around March and April, then we started to see it increase a little bit, but we're trending back down again. And it makes you wonder if our call volume, just something to be aware of, if our call volume is going to trend with possibly the positive cases within the state. So we're watching our call volume as well, because that also dictates how many officers we need working each shift. Again, we've talked about it before, but it has impacted a bit in a way in our traditional sense of traffic enforcement. But we remain creative in the way that we're addressing traffic issues. We're using decoy cars, speed signs, social media. We're monitoring. We know the streets that we typically have issues on, and those are the streets that the officers are still spending time on, running radar, putting the signs out. If there is anything egregious, a hazardous violation, or someone significantly over the speed limit, they are making those types of stops. But in the traditional sense, again, we have scaled back. Again, all because we're just trying to. The main priority is keeping everyone healthy. And Mayor, you had mentioned in one of our meetings about a couple of traffic safety speeding campaigns that some local towns have taken on. We've researched them. We've liked what we've seen, so we're going to be incorporating something similar to that as well. Hopefully in the next couple of weeks, we'll be able to roll that out. And obviously I'll make everyone aware when we do. Firearms, just an update in regards to firearm permits, something we've talked about here a few times. We continue to see a rise in our firearms applications. Again, historically, these have tended to increase during election years. In conversations at state chiefs meetings and Mercer County chiefs meetings, all municipalities are experiencing the same thing. There's a significant rise in permit applications. And right now, throughout the year in 2019, we had 60 applications. So far this year, we're at 219. So we're expecting we're going to go over 300 by the end of the year, because I think we have like another 50 that are being processed right now. We opened up our recruitment this past week. A couple of goals in our recruitment. The first is to ensure that there's a significant amount of diversity within our applicant pool. It's something that we've always been very proud of in the Princeton Police Department, that we are a diverse police department, and we represent the town of Princeton. So we want our applicant pool to mirror the police department in the town as well. So we spend a good amount of time in ensuring that there is diversity in our applicant pool. And then the second, we're making a significant push in advertising within Princeton. We like to bring out as many Princeton residents that are interested in this profession, and hopefully the Princeton Police Department to come out and be part of the process. It hasn't even been open a week. As of this morning, we had 123 applications. When I left later this afternoon, we were already close to 140. So they're coming in quickly. We're going to start. It's going to be an open enrollment process. It's going to be a little bit different in the past because of COVID and other reasons, where we're not going to have a test administered by the state chiefs, and it's going to be an open rolling process. We don't want anyone that might be a great applicant for this police department to not have the opportunity to apply just because there was a cutoff date. So we're hoping in the next few months to start the interview and the background process with a few applicants. And again, certainly I'll make everyone advised of where we are in that process as well. We started our annual coat drive again. We've been advertising that, and it's absolutely incredible. I heard we have almost 1,000 coats this year. We attribute it to maybe people are home and they are cleaning out their closets. But if anybody has a coat or a winter hat or winter gloves that are in good condition, there's a box inside the police department lobby where you can package them up and toss them in there for now. All the collected items are going to stay within Princeton, and they're going to be distributed to Princeton families. But it looks like this is going to be the biggest coat drive and the most successful coat drive that we've had since we started, which has been about 7 years now. And then lastly, on another great note, I don't want to steal their thunder, but the PBA, which comprises all the members of the Princeton Police Department, they're working with Human Services, and they are doing an incredible amount of outreach this holiday season, and they are adopting many families this year. So my hat's off to them. I'm so proud of the men and women of the organization and the way they're giving back to the community. It's fantastic. When I heard, I'll let them put out the details, but just to be aware of that, they're making a significant contribution, and not just a financial contribution, but also working with Human Services to help collect some of the items and distribute them to many families in need in Princeton. So again, that's the update for September. If you have any questions, again, I know you have a busy meeting, it sounds like, but those are some of the highlights of the police department for now.
Great, thanks, Chief. Are there any questions for the Chief? Ms. Niederking?
First, Captain Morgan, good to see you, and thank you so much. And I know that I had asked some questions last month about both speeding enforcement, about the gun permit. So I really appreciate you taking the initiative to update us on that. And this may not be the time, and I'm sure we'll be spending more time on this later. But of course, at the election, New Jersey voters chose to institute legalization of marijuana. I'm just wondering, and my understanding is municipalities are going to have to make fairly rapid progress on making the decision about whether we want to say, kind of yay or nay to that. And I'm wondering if you are going to have some group, or what's your plan for how to proceed and how to be part of this conversation that we'll be having about what action we should take in response to this?
Sure. So there's been conversation already through, again, at the county level, at the county chiefs meetings, and then virtually through the state chiefs meeting as well. The Attorney General came out and spoke at the state chiefs meeting. Right now, as it's been explained and given throughout law enforcement, all the municipalities, is that yes, there was a vote to legalize it, and Dwayne, you might be able to talk more about the process here, but until it makes its way through the legislature, it still remains a law that is on the books. The way it was described to us is that we don't have the ability to ignore law. However, there is discretion applied more at the court level. And that was a memo that came out from the Attorney General maybe a few months ago about discretion being applied at the court level. For us right now, because our motor vehicle stops, that's where the majority of the marijuana arrests came from. Since they're a bit more limited because of the pandemic, we're not seeing any of those types of arrests. I will say, though, the Attorney General, the way he explained it was, and again, Dwayne, maybe you'd be able to more of the time frame on it, but he explained that it could be a several month process by the time the legislature gets everything in order and they identify a lot of the details and the restrictions and the criteria as we go forward. But we have great support between the Attorney General's been fantastic for the state, fantastic for law enforcement, and then as it comes through the county prosecutor's office, the information, once it's decided on, it'll make its way to us, and then we'll adjust accordingly from there.
Thank you.
If I may, I'll add to what the chief says is correct. I actually read that same memo from Attorney General Gurbir Graywall, and essentially what he's saying is that marijuana is still illegal in the state of New Jersey, even though it passed, the referendum passed, and that the legislature still has to create enabling legislation of how legalization would actually work, right? So we have to wait for that to come down. So he basically he said it's still illegal, which means when things are illegal, you still have to enforce the law against it. But he also gave broad discretion and how it enforces that law. So, and he says, don't make any blanket ways of dealing with it, because then law enforcement and the prosecutors will be taking the place of the legislature if they did that.
Yes.
So basically, you almost can do the same thing over and over again. You just can't make it a policy. Okay. All right. So
Thank you. Yeah, that was great. Yeah. Right. Exactly what he said. That was his wording verbatim, I think. You can't make any blanket policy. Correct.
Right.
Yep.
Right. Thanks.
Are there any other questions for the chief? I just had one. When you started off, you were just talking about COVID and the impact on the department and the new schedule. And can you, I know one of the concerns just across the country for people on the front lines is burnout, and it's just, incredibly stressful with the pandemic. Can you talk about what supports are available to police officers if they're having a tough time?
Sure. So we have internally the EAP program, which we promote on a routine basis. There's also several programs through the county and then also through the state program as associations as well. And a lot of times the PBA, the union itself, offers a lot of support programs. A lot of these right now, even within the police department, they're posted. They're available. They're on our electronic board at work as well. They can be anonymous, phone calls, it can be virtual. So the support is out there. But a lot of times just what we find is internally just having some conversation with the men and women of the organization kind of seems like it goes a long way to know that everyone is experiencing this fatigue, as it's being called, I guess, throughout the entire police department. So we're aware of the frustration, I guess, and the fatigue that can settle in, and it's something that we're very much aware of and monitor closely.
Great, thank you. Mr.
Sure.
John?
Yeah, just a quick question. I think I got a call, I think it was just this last weekend, from concerned citizen about people's behavior in the central business district, not being masked and so on. And I know that the police department had a sort of mask ambassador program. I think this person actually called the police department and was having a little bit of trouble understanding how to sort of report the concern and get some enforcement activity. Can you talk a little bit about that for people in town who are concerned, what they should do if they see people not complying with policy?
Sure. So I don't want to step on Jeff's toes, but I've had conversations with Jeff. The way I understand it and the way it's being handled right now within the municipality is that we're not looking at it so much as an enforcement process with law enforcement and the police department. We're looking at it more, coming at it from more of a educational standpoint from the health department. There have been ambassadors out there in the past, and I know we've used our parking officers as well. The police department, we've tried to be supportive in the sense of using our variable message boards to get some of the education campaign part of it out. If there are issues within the community that people see, they can call the police department, and we can always make those referrals back to the health department.
And Chief, if I may add, on that day that was reported, it was actually the police was dealing with another emergency.
Yeah, we did bring it to water main break, correct?
Yes. So, but we did bring it to the attention of our health department, and they were going to make sure put folks back out there, mask ambassadors.
Okay, yeah, I guess it was a weekend. So
yes.
It was difficult to get through to the health department.
I reached out to.
I know you did, but but there should be a way for people to know, be able to get in touch with the health
Yeah,
department.
and I would say the police department is a great hub of communication for that to come through this way. And then we can always relay the information if needed.
I'm happy to jump in real quick. The Princeton Health Department is reachable on the weekends as well. The non-emergency police number can be contacted and somebody will answer and then we'll respond as necessary. We try to make a conscious approach to handle some of those complaints as they come in, because again, the mask ambassadors that go out, it's more of an educational thing. And we're trying to maintain, Chris obviously has, Chief Morgan has a staffing priority that he wants to make sure that he keeps his officers, healthy and out there. So we're trying to maintain their separation from those complaints. So we're handling those as they come in. So the non-emergency police number can be called after hours and on the weekends.
Thank you. Are there any other questions for the chief? Okay, well, thank you so much. And please thank everybody in the department for your work. And hopefully the spring is going to bring some relief.
Yeah, we'll do. Thank you, Maren. And as always, thank you for your support, everyone.
Thanks, Chief.
Thanks.
Have a great night. Be well.
You too.
You too, Chief.
Okay, next is the report from the health department on COVID, and like to welcome, oh my gosh, you're jumping around the screen, Jeff Grosser.
Thank you, Mayor. This evening, I wanted to take a moment and update Mayor and Council on a few items that have been trending with the COVID-19 pandemic. Last time I reported out, school was kind of just starting again, and things looked a lot differently than they do now. So I just wanted to take a moment and update you all, as well as the community, on some case trends that we've been seeing in Princeton, the vaccine development from what we're hearing at our department level, the schools reopening and their ongoing progress, and then obviously the looming upcoming Thanksgiving holiday that everyone hopefully is looking forward to. So as of today, Princeton has had 301 confirmed positive COVID cases. And I think what's unfortunate about those numbers is that we are definitely trending with some of the national and regional trends that are seeing an uptick in the caseload. And just for, I guess, some reference, this past week, we've seen 18 positive cases and 30 in the last 2 weeks, both of which are the second highest total since our peak back in early May. And we'll talk a little bit about where we think that's happening from. We've seen 136% increase in the prevalence of the disease, looking at what we were seeing during the summertime to where we are at this part of the fall. We've been seeing positive cases increasing since August 12th. Our positive cases have increased 5 times throughout the Princeton population, comparing to the number of positive cases registered between August 12th and August 25th, which again was one of our lower points, around 6 cases during that week. And then the cases registered in the last couple of weeks, which has been 21 cases over the course of the last week and a half, 2 weeks. Our average age of people in Princeton that have been testing positive continues to decrease since July. In July, at that point, our average was 63 years of age, and our current average is actually at 32 years of age. In the last few weeks, we've been in the low 20s range, and a lot of that's being brought down by some of the younger Princeton residents we've been noticing that have been testing positive at some of our schools, obviously, and through sports. Considering some of the current structure of the population, according to race and ethnicity, the burden of disease, unfortunately, in terms of percentage of cases, has been disproportionately increasing among Hispanic and Latinos. And we started to notice this really in September and October. And just for some context, right now, our positive case count for African Americans is around 5.5% compared to the distribution through the census data, which is about 5.8%. And whenever in public health, when we look at data for disease distribution, obviously there's a ton of variables to think about. With COVID, we're starting to recognize some of those other variables. However, we're trying to keep it as simple as we can. So when we look at demographics, if one particular race or ethnicity has a higher incidence, there's something going on. And obviously we want to look into it and try to help out And, that's kind of our social services hat that we put on to try to figure things out and obviously work with human services there. Our Hispanic or Latino population in Princeton, although it only comprises about 7.7% of the population, 21% of our cases have actually been linked back to a Hispanic or Latino resident. So that obviously is an alarming statistic that we've been highlighting, and I'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. White or Caucasian, 66.7% in Princeton compared to 61% of the cases. And then for Asian Americans, 16% of Princeton residents, or about 13% of cases. So clearly a lot of similarities there, except for Hispanic or Latino. So when we talk about that, we try to look at the national perspective, and then we start to narrow it down towards the state, and then the county, and then Princeton. And if you look at the country, obviously, you've all done some of the research. You've all heard about the pandemic. People of color obviously being hit the hardest. Right now, the Centers for Disease Control says Latinos are actually being hospitalized from the virus at 4 times the rate of white Americans. So this staggering statistic, if you've been following nationally, shows that 26% of people that have actually died from COVID in this country were Latino. So clearly that's pretty disproportionate. And there's a lot of factors that we look into. Obviously, from a national level, you could look at it, but in Princeton, we try to narrow that down a little bit closer too. Obviously, the population of this group of Latinos are disproportionately represented in the essential workforce, along with multi-generational households in the United States and also in Princeton. That's obviously been, as a consequence, created some type of overexposure to the virus. But also, I think it also includes, as I just talked about our social hat at the health department, the lack of social protections when we talk about things like health insurance come into major play for this particular population. So, knowing that they have lower rates, the Latinos have lower rates of health insurance, this segment of the population, especially undocumented immigrants, there's major limitations. So as a barrier, we have to recognize that. And that's how we have to try to, work our response out to make sure that this population in Princeton, our residents here, are not suffering, because quite frankly, multi-generational households, at least, growing up, I always thought that was a great thing. My parents always told me that was a great thing. They have a myriad of benefits culturally and developmentally, but unfortunately, obviously even during the pandemic for remote learning, that's great, right? Because you have, a family member at home with the student that can help watch them and help them learn. Although remote learning is not always easy for the kids, let alone the parents. So the grandparents, hopefully they've got an extra step on technology, but that's a problem. But the issue is with multi-generational households is that's the population we're worried about with regards to contracting COVID. So we need, as a town, to start to develop better interventions with regards to how do we make sure that this population, number one, trusts us with regards to these are the interventions we're going to try to bring up, and this is how we're going to try to help you, to how do we get them adequate health care, adequate testing, and how do they know when they can seek medical care and when they're not worried about what those medical bills are going to be. So we've taken some steps, obviously during the spring and the summer, we worked out an agreement with the Theological Seminary for adequate quarantine and isolation, but it's not that simple, because even if you have a place for quarantine and isolation, you still have to have the residents, those individuals that need to quarantine and isolate, you have to get them to leave their home, leave their family, and go quarantine and isolate. So it's not as easy as just having a place. And further, it's not as easy to say, now's the time to go to the hospital, or now's the time to go to the doctor. So we are really relying on our community gatekeepers to speak to these families that they know, so we can get in there and do the most good, because it's not going to be as easy as a contact trace. Our contact tracers are fantastic, but there's always barriers with regards to how much we can help when we get in there. So obviously there's a lot of work to be done there, and I'm happy to talk about it more, but I'll move on really quickly to vaccine development, because I don't want to take up your whole night. As you're all aware, U.S. leaders, health experts, and public health officials woke up very optimistic to hear that a second experimental coronavirus vaccine developed by Moderna was found to be nearly 95% effective today in a preliminary analysis. Came just a week after Pfizer announced that their vaccine was more than 90% effective. So now that we have two vaccines that are really quite effective, really should serve as hope for Princeton. but it's necessary to understand that we're still months away from widespread distribution. Today, the Princeton Health Department participated in a vaccine distribution planning session with the state health department. And what was clear from that session was that the vaccine distribution will be given priority to healthcare workers, healthcare systems, and long-term care centers and nursing homes, which you're all aware were dramatically impacted by COVID-19. But vaccine safety and approval by the general population is really going to need a concentrated effort, because it's not a given that everyone's going to want this vaccine. There's going to be concern over the speed of its delivery and development, which is completely understood. And as a town, we have to continue to trust the science, and we have to listen to our experts. And Princeton has, especially on the Princeton Board of Health, has a tremendous expertise with regards to some of this stuff. So, we need to listen to them and then hear what vaccines are available and what will be provided to the general population. So more information to come on that. But to be honest with you, there's a lot of questions, and we're trying to get those answered before I provide too much more information. But all I can tell you is it sounds like some of the first vaccines going to be distributed in the state of New Jersey sometime in mid to late December, and most likely, like I mentioned, to those healthcare systems. Jumping on to the last two items with regards to schools, Princeton public schools and private schools have been performing relentless work really during the last 10 weeks. Both school administration and teachers, and obviously staff and parents and volunteers have been working through exposures and positive cases of COVID on a daily basis with our health department. I can't say enough about the school nurses in Princeton. They work so hard and are in constant contact with our public health nurse, Kathy Corwin, trying to work through exposures, quarantines, and then obviously isolations. It does sound like there is some movement to discuss potential, whether it's a remote week after Thanksgiving or some type of plan for the week after Thanksgiving to make sure that, if individuals over the course of Thanksgiving are potentially exposed, that's not being brought right back into the schools. Because quite frankly, through Princeton, what we have found is that we are not seeing cases spread in the schools. We are seeing cases brought in through the doors of the school. And to no one's direct fault, the schools have done a tremendous job of clamping down on those cases, doing contact tracing, and then contacting us. Especially at this point, they've all become experts. But it's still, because of our community transmission being so high, we have to stay on top of the fact that sometimes our best defense on this is remote learning, and that might come to play. But we're going to make sure we're having those conversations, and all the people that need to be part of it are part of it. Which brings us to our last topic, which everyone's aware next week is Thanksgiving. Governor Murphy provided a new drawback on an existing order, which is to limit indoor gatherings to 10 people. Primary reason for this is due to the fact that we are seeing a tremendous number of cases being tied back to smaller household gatherings. We're seeing it in Princeton, we're seeing it in Mercer County, we're seeing it in Central West New Jersey, and we're seeing it in the state of New Jersey. It's unfortunate that this is obviously happening prior to a holiday where we're all used to gathering with friends and family for a historic American holiday. But I think we need to make sure that this particular Thanksgiving, we're doing our part to really limit the spread. So we've been providing a lot of information and Thanksgiving guidance through PrincetonCovid.org. I know the municipality is looking at a similar tactic with its municipal staff to make sure that staff are safe the week after Thanksgiving. But the health department and myself as a health officer is just asking, all Princeton residents to, celebrate the holiday, but make sure you're celebrating it with your household, members of your household. It's a lot to ask, but what we're understanding is that with the current community transmission, projections are if people go about their business as normal Thanksgiving, we are going to be in for an increase in the number of cases we have not seen before. So I really do plead to everybody. Thanksgiving is my personal favorite holiday. I'm doing it with my own family here. We have a lot of tips and things like that for families to do. It's not going to be an easy Thanksgiving, but I know Princeton, as innovative as it's been through this whole pandemic, can definitely get through it together. And, I thank Mayor, I thank Council for the newsletters you all put out, because every week we hear from a number of residents that talk about the information that's in there, and they're asking us questions about it. And I'm proud to have you all as the voice here. So I appreciate all of that hard work on your part, because I know that's not easy either. So at this point, that's my report. I'm happy to take questions.
Okay, thank you. And I just wanted to start by saying, probably on behalf of everybody in the entire community, thank you for leading us so ably through this crisis. It's like every day I wake up and I'm just really thankful for the work you're doing. And we have, again, like a really great team on the Board of Health that's helping to support you, but it's a phenomenal job. So thank you.
Thank you, Mayor.
We'll start with Ms. Fraga.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a couple of questions. And I know we have a Board of Health meeting coming up this week, but just some questions that came to mind during your presentation. And thank you. You really are doing an amazing job. And we, I wish we could be hearing from you daily because we always have questions that pop up, especially from our community. But regarding when you were talking about tips and guidance that you've been providing, and when you were referring to the multi-general families living in a household, sometimes it's even unrelated members that are living in a household where not everybody has their own bedroom. Are you able to come up with any tips and guidance that we can provide to our community in those situations when somebody needs to quarantine? Are there any safe ways where somebody can do it in those type of situations?
It's a great question. No, it's a great question, Councilwoman, and I appreciate that. Multi-generational families are sometimes easier because the communication between the families is sometimes more consistent. And you're right, we've come across a number of cases where we've had separate families living in the same dwelling. And in those circumstances, it's more difficult to quarantine and isolate because they might be on different schedules. The spouses might be working in different positions and not always there at the same time. And the children are being watched by maybe a neighbor. So in those circumstances, the easiest thing with regards to quarantine and isolation has to do with individuals staying within the confines of their own room for the period of the quarantine. That's not always easy either. And in those circumstances, when we identify a positive case, we try to work through what the housing structure looks like and the family structure and the other family structure. And in most cases, individuals don't want to accept that quarantine or isolation in another location. They want to stay put. So we try to work through the best method to keep them there, because a lot of times it's also a childcare issue.
Right.
So we try to make sure that they're as safe as possible. And then also with the children, we want to make sure that the children aren't putting anyone else in harm's way because that particular guardian or other family member is in that particular household. So we really do the best we can with regards to monitoring that household to make sure that that case is not going to spread outside of that house. That being said, you think about the 301 cases we've had, and we've had 30 in the last 2 weeks. Each one of those cases has its own story. So we do our best with those households to try to make sure that those cases aren't spreading beyond that particular residence.
Okay. And hopefully you'll get some help, because that was my other question. I know you're either recruiting, I don't know if you've already identified someone I believe the title was Vulnerable Population Outreach Coordinator. Is that correct?
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up. So the position's actually a fully funded position. It was a CARES Act grant funded position through the federal government that was distributed to the state health department. The state health department divvied up their funding into the 77 local health departments, all for the purpose of hiring their own vulnerable population outreach coordinator, with the purpose of, going into these populations that are being hit the hardest and trying to work out interventions. It's a 2-year position. It's a position that we've never had before because it's concentrated on a particular demographic. And we actually have a good reference point in terms of where we're starting. So I'm hopeful that position can get in there and then obviously make those disproportionate rates go away, but it's going to take a lot of work, and obviously it's going to take a lot of partnerships.
Great. Well, I'm hopeful too, and good luck recruiting the right person.
Thank you. Thank you for bringing that up.
Thank you.
Ms. Brown-Lambros?
And thank you, Jeff. Everyone is so grateful for all the great work that you're doing. Just have a couple, I just want to ask you, just to follow on, when we're talking about, the holidays and getting together, and we've had fairly mild weather and maybe it'll continue. How safe is it really to gather outdoors? I mean, a lot of people are saying that would be, an alternative. What's the experience in terms of this new increase that we're seeing and the fact that the weather's getting colder and people maybe are moving inside?
It's a great question. And I think part of the concern, even with Governor Murphy, that's why regardless of the rates going up, I think that's one of the reasons why the governor put the restriction on limiting the gathering, both for Thanksgiving and the purpose of the fact that people are gathering inside more. This week in particular is going to be the coldest week we've had in a number of months. All I can speak to is our contact tracing and where we've been tying cases back to. We saw a huge increase back in late September and early October to certain indoor sports like hockey and basketball. Whereas we have had maybe one exposure to a outdoor sports event right now. We're not seeing a lot of outdoor exposure. So what that tells us is we really need to pay attention to our indoor gatherings and our indoor interactions with individuals. Doesn't mean they can't happen. It just means we have to be, super vigilant when we're dealing with those circumstances. I think the businesses in particular, from the Merchants Association meeting last week, they've been so on top of ventilation, sanitation, and I usually speak for the restaurants, but I know for the other retail establishments have done a tremendous job with trying to make sure that customers are safe. And I'm not saying anything about that. I think they've done a great job. And as the limitations exist, we'll do our best to try to make sure that those orders are educated to both the shoppers and also the retailers. But a lot of what we've been seeing, like I mentioned, I call them unorganized indoor gatherings. They're parties where they're not, it's not a wedding. It's not I'll just say it's not a wedding, but they're usually gatherings where, let's say Halloween, we saw a number of Halloween parties that were linked back to this. And I call them unorganized because when I call a host or a hostess and I say, how many people were there? The answers are, I don't know. Do you know who was there? I don't know everybody. I call those unorganized. So the more organized the gatherings are, as long as they're within the limits, makes us a lot happier because we can go through and talk to people and get the right information out.
Yeah, that's terrific. Well, we've been super organized. The schools have been amazing for the outdoor sports, doing contact tracing, and doing signups right at the gate. So, and you're just doing a tremendous job. And thank you for your guidance with that and leadership.
Appreciate that. Thank you, Councilwoman.
Thanks. Ms. Sachs?
Yeah, this is more of a comment. I was listening to Helene Gale on the way home, and she was talking about the report that was just released, the framework for equitable allocation of COVID-19 vaccine. It's about the government rollout and what you were describing, Jeff, about the categories of people and how they will prioritize who is eligible for the vaccine and categorizing people by tiers. And she made the very good point. The interviewer asked her and said, given how disproportionately communities of color have been impacted by the vaccine, it's not mentioned in your report that you're prioritizing those communities. And she said they felt that it was very important in terms of the framing to prioritize by how vulnerable people are in terms of risk rather than by race. Mm-hmm. So I know it seems like a subtle point, but I really feel like in our town, it's very important to use that language of risk than race, because as she pointed out, for example, the Latino population they're not disproportionately impacted due to racial implications per se, obviously, but because of as she put it, not because of race, but because of racism, which makes them, it creates a whole cluster of conditions, which puts them more at risk. So I'm just encouraging everyone in the community to use that framing of risk rather than race.
No, I really appreciate that point. I think the one thing that, if I had to clean up what I just mentioned, I would say with prioritization, if you look at, Princeton in particular, prioritization for vaccine right now would go to, if we could do it on our own, first, long-term care centers. Second, it would go to essential workers. And that's where I think we would make a huge inroad. And I know that certain states, certain counties around the country are actually looking to do just that, where they start to prioritize the population that has been hit the hardest. And it's not in a race or ethnic context. It's more so from an occupational standpoint, because they've seen certain occupations just be hit super hard. And, that's the best intervention we could have.
I just want to, before I go back, Michelle, did anybody else have any questions for Jeff? All right, Ms. Pearl-Lambros.
I just want to follow up that with a thought. I know you won't have the answers to this right now, but we probably need to start thinking about the resources and how, given that the CARES Act 2 round is really questionable when and if that will happen, or not if, but when. But thinking about, how we're going to have resources, if that's going to come from the state, if not the federal and local, to get the vaccine out, because it's one thing to have it, it's another thing to get it to the most vulnerable population. So I just wanted to throw that thought out there. I know I'm not going to put you on the spot and ask you if you know the answer, because I'm sure you don't yet, but it's definitely something we all need to work with you on to figure this out quickly.
Thank you. And the one thing I will mention on that is, and I believe, Mayor, correct me if I'm wrong, in your one newsletter, we are looking for nurses or individuals that are able to vaccinate. So we're looking to pool a group of Princeton residents together that can do that, because right now the state and the CDC has not provided guidance as to one of our larger groups of vaccinators, which are potentially EMTs. We believe that they might be able to, but if in the event that they're not allowed to, we will definitely be short vaccinators. So we'll definitely need a group of individuals that could help us with that.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thanks. So Jeff, I wanted to ask you the same question that was asked to the chief, just because this comes up a lot, where it's both, I guess, a problem that we're lucky to have, which is that our downtown is just really popular and really, really crowded, especially Fridays and over the weekends. And it makes a lot of people extremely nervous when they go to town and they see people who are not wearing masks. And I guess if you just reiterate, I just got a text on this, so they might have missed the sort of first time we went through this, but I mean, if you have recommendations for people, I know we have the signage up encouraging people to wear masks. I mean, it's a challenge. I would say that it's probably a challenge in every community to get people to wear their masks, especially outside.
Yeah, I mean, this is a social norm that has completely changed the landscape of America. I mean, to think that we've gone this far, I try to think about it optimistically, where I see where we were back in March, where individuals were not wearing masks, and then it was recommended, and we still had a hard time with it. I think we saw our peak of mask wearing probably late spring. And then I think we talk about it all the time, and I don't like to give into it, the pandemic fatigue. And I think certain people are, getting tired of hearing about it, or I think the individuals that have understood the science behind wearing a mask are going to continue to wear a mask until the people in science say you don't need to wear a mask anymore, and maybe they'll wear it beyond that. But with regards to downtown, it's going to be a work in progress. Princeton residents have to continue to wear their masks, because I think the more people that wear masks downtown, the more likely other individuals will be to wear their own masks. Our department does receive complaints about people are non-mask wearing, it's typically coming from businesses that are not wearing them, but it's not a lot of businesses. It's usually just a couple. And it's a conversation with them, it's education. And obviously there's ADA issues, and we've already identified those issues with some of those businesses. We do receive complaints predominantly on nicer days. This past weekend, the weekend before, it was unbelievable. And in Heinz Plaza, I've received about 24 complaints in just one afternoon because of how nice it was, and people were down there not wearing masks. What should people do? Number one, they can go on to SeeClickFix and address a complaint through there, and we will receive that. But in real time, as I mentioned before, they can call the non-emergency police number. And although we may not respond down there in lights and sirens, we will get a sense of the mask ambassadors that we deployed before. We might need to do it in a different way. We might need to have more of them. We might need to do it just in different methods. But we need to hear about those complaints, because if we don't hear about those complaints regularly, then we won't necessarily know where to go, and then we won't know how to really gauge what's happening on a particular day. I do have my own fears about, obviously, the shopping season's upon us with the holidays, and we're all trying to support our local businesses as much as possible. We want to do so safely. So we're always looking for good interventions as well. And I know the public loves to provide, good input. I'm happy to take that input and try to put it into some type of action with regards to how to make sure people are wearing masks downtown. We don't want to come down and just penalize people or enforce it. We want to make sure we educate people so people do it, and then they continue to do it.
Right. Thank you. And then I guess the other thing that there was a notice that came out from the CDC last week that said by wearing a mask, I think originally the message was if you wear a mask to protect other people. I think there's more data now that by wearing a mask, you are protecting other people, but you're also protecting yourself to some degree. It's, I think the more we all wear masks, we're not just putting out the message that that's important and creating that social norm, but there's some protection for the wearer as well, which is good news. Okay, and then I just had a last question about testing and like how I know that Mercer County has the testing by mail, and can you just give an update on what the timing is for how long those tests are taking, and in general with the cases going up, are we also seeing a slowdown in the testing, or is that kept up?
So yeah, I'm happy to report that the testing has kept up even with the increase. New Jersey doing a tremendous amount of tests at this point. They've tested over 5 million individuals. The Mercer County testing, Mercer County is offering free at-home testing for COVID-19. You can go on to, I believe it's mercercares.com. It's on princetoncovid.org. And you're able to request a free at-home test kit if you either work in Mercer County or either work in Mercer County or live in Mercer County. We have been hearing a couple complaints or issues with individuals that work in Mercer and don't live here. If that happens, please send an email to my email, jgrosser@princetonnj.gov, and I'm happy to put you in touch with the county and we'll work that out. But if you work in Mercer County, don't live here, you should be able to get a free at-home test kit. We also just updated all the testing sites in our region. We also included all rapid tests on there as well. But it includes on there, I believe, insurance, the cost, everything is on there. So that should be on princetoncovid.org as well. That was just updated today.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Are there any final questions for Mr. Grosser? All right. Thanks, Jeff. We really appreciate the update.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jeff.
Okay, so we'll turn now to council reports, and I wanted to start with Council President Cohen. Any reports for this evening? You're muted, David.
Sorry about that. I had got ahead of myself and was looking at my written reports. So these are 3 quick reports on 3 ordinances that we've been working on. just wanted to give you updates on a couple of them because they've been a little bit delayed. So first is there's an ordinance that included requirements for electronic filing for land use applications. You know, I've been working on this ever since I came on council. And then also new stormwater submission requirements. So these are both updates to the checklist. And staff met last week with legal counsel, and we were discussing the exact form that the ordinance should take. And it came out in the discussion that currently the checklist portion of the ordinance is very repetitive. We have several different kinds of land use applications, major site plans, major subdivisions, minor site plans, and others as well. And the checklists are largely similar, but they're repeated like 5 times in the ordinance. So we're trying to streamline that and gather all of the common requirements in one location, and then only have specialized requirements for the different types of applications that would be occurring in different locations. So that's going to take a couple of weeks to get done. And of course, as you know, since we're getting close to the end of the year, we don't have time to introduce and hear ordinances before the end of the year, essentially after tonight. So this ordinance is going to come back in early 2021. The second item had to do with community impact statements. Again, this is a planning issue. It was recommended by the planning board, I think about a year ago, and then sort of never got followed up on. These community impact statements are supposed to be submitted with large development applications and to give the planning department information about impacts on the schools, impacts on our infrastructure, impacts on our services, and impact on our finances in the form of revenue that the municipality can expect coming from these developments. And so we were working on putting together an ordinance, and legal counsel actually pointed out that this is not actually something that the council needs to formally act on. It's within the authority of the planning department to require these kinds of information from applicants. So we're looking at doing them as a standard condition of approval rather than something that's on the checklist and something that's ordinanced. So in this case, this is not something that will be coming back to us in the new year. It's just being set aside as something that's not, that doesn't require council action. The last item is the bicycle parking ordinance, which we actually are introducing tonight. Been having some additional conversations with the university about an alternative method for calculating the bicycle parking requirements for institutions of higher learning. Again, there's some kinks that we need to work out, but rather than delay the introduction, because we're getting new applications all the time for other kinds of development that could use the guidance on bicycle parking, we're going to go ahead and introduce that as it is, but with the expectation that there will be some modifications to put in place next year to make it really optimal for both the university and the municipality. And I'm happy to fill out, flush out what those tweaks are going to be if people are curious. So that's my report, my 3 reports.
Great, thank you. Ms. Fraga, any reports?
I do, Mayor. Just a brief one. A couple of weeks ago, some members of the Affordable Housing Board attended the Civil Rights Commission monthly meeting. They attended meeting to provide an overview of of affordable housing in Princeton. They give us an overview of what's existing now, and also as well as a presentation of research completed by their subcommittee on overcoming obstacles to affordable housing. Members of the Human Services Commission were also invited to attend the CRC meeting because earlier, both the Human Services Commission and the Civil Rights Commission had identified helping our residents overcome those obstacles as an initiative that both commissions would want to collaborate on. It was agreed that members from each BCC, being affordable housing, civil rights, and human services, are going to be working together to address 3 areas. 1, legislative advocacy, and this is in the area of affordable housing policy at the state level. 2, best practices in program implementation. And 3, financial and credit counseling for affordable housing applicants. This is basically 3 BCCs that came together to work on a common area of interest. And I expect that at some time in the near future, hopefully may be coming before council with recommendations on actions that council may be asked to consider policy actions. That's it.
Terrific. Thank you. Ms. Niedergang?
I'll just give a very brief update on the new plastics legislation, which Governor Murphy signed the day after the election. That starts an 18-month countdown clock. Princeton Environmental Commission, along with Sustainable Princeton, will be working on developing education for our merchants. Councilwoman Perrin-Lambros will be involved with this as well, in order to showcase products for the merchants, to explain the legislation, to put them in contact with merchants in other communities who already have plastic bag bans and have plastic and styrofoam and have figured out how to adapt. So we really want to be in a position where we can hold people's hand going through this process and make it as easy as possible. And we're hoping to planning on getting that started in January. So after the holiday season, hopefully when people have some more downtime, be able to shift their focus from the most important month of the year to looking forward into the future. So it's going to be a great thing for the environment, but it will be a learning curve, not only for the merchants, but for people in the community. So we'll also be looking towards providing education to the community later on in the process. So, thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Williamson?
No reports, Mayor.
Okay, thanks. Ms. Sachs?
Nothing tonight.
And Ms. Perrin-Lambros?
Yeah, just briefly, first of all, thank you to Councilwoman Niedergang for the leadership on that. I think the Environmental Commission and Sustainable Princeton will be great resources for the business communities. So I'm looking forward to tackling that in a new ban after the first of the year. I just want to mention too that given our situation with the increased cases of COVID and Governor Murphy's recent changes, I think that before our ordinance expires at the end of the year, we may want to consider and bring forth for the next council meeting an extension of our ordinance to allow for the outdoor dining. I sat outside and ate on Saturday night, so it was about as cold as a winter night usually gets. And with heaters and a nice warm coat, I was okay. So I'm hoping that, and given what Mr. Grosser just said about, the efficacy of being outdoors as opposed to being indoors, and knowing that things are going in the direction they're going in, unfortunately, with the holidays, I think we need to, consider going in extending and allowing that opportunity if the restaurants, want to do that, and retailers as well. So I just wanted to mention that as a report. Thank you.
Great, thank you. I just have this probably should have gone under announcements, but I'll do it as a report. One of the really nice community events every year is the Community Thanksgiving Service, which is normally held on Thanksgiving morning in the University Chapel. And it's a multi-denominational service. This year, it's not going to be held in person, but there will be a video that's being distributed. So for folks that are that normally come to that service, or if you're interested in checking it out, keep your eye out for that. And for sure, it'll be released by Thanksgiving morning, if not a few days before. Are there any staff reports? Okay. We will move on then to the work session for this evening, and this is on the electric vehicles charging stations ordinance that the Princeton Environmental Commission has been working on. And I know that Councilman Niedergang wanted to make some introductory remarks, but before that, I just wanted to say how timely this was. This week, many of us are attending a virtual convention. The New Jersey League of Municipalities, which is the organization of all elected officials and municipal staff members in the state, normally get together in person, but it's virtual this year to talk about different issues. And I attended a session this morning that the Department of Environmental Protection was putting on about climate change. And they had a handful of items they were encouraging towns to do. And at the top of the list was really beefing up your electric vehicle charging infrastructure so you can be ready for influx of more vehicles. So felt like that it was very timely. This was on our agenda for discussion tonight, and wanted to hand it over to Councilwoman Niedergang.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I don't have a lot to say. I wanted to introduce Ann Soch, who's representing the Environmental Commission and has been working along with PEC Chair Sophie Glovier and other members of the PEC just really, really hard to get this up and running. And I think Ann will focus on this, but there are things that will be coming in the next few pages, which hopefully you've all looked at, which seem kind of pretty standard and not controversial. And then there are other issues that I felt I really wanted your input and guidance on. How do we thread this needle? We're definitely going to have an ordinance, but how aggressive should we be in pushing for this? So I'm hoping that we'll have a good discussion about which way we should go on this, and at the decision points that Ann will present to us, really have a discussion about how we want to handle different elements of the potential ordinance. And then the hope is that it will go to legal. And as Councilman Cohen mentioned, it's too late to introduce an ordinance and then have a public hearing this year at this point, but hopefully we'll get to this very early next year. So with that, I shall turn it over to Ann, and thank you again for being here and for all the work that you've put into this.
Thanks very much for the opportunity to speak to you this evening. So got our PowerPoint set up here.
Full screen mode, that's the one.
Okay, so I'm Ann Soch, a member of the Princeton Environmental Commission, and I want to thank you for the opportunity to talk to you tonight about our research into electric vehicle charging stations. Next, please. Transportation is responsible for almost 1/3 of the greenhouse gas emissions in Princeton. Next. The state has set some very, very ambitious 5-year goals in terms of battery-powered electric vehicles, BEVs, and the charging stations that they will need. Next. So we thought it would be good to include a few definitions in this presentation. EVCS, electric vehicle charging stations, or charging station for BEVs. And then the different levels of chargers for getting electricity to the vehicles. Level 1 chargers use a standard 120-volt outlet. Probably all of us have these in our garage. It takes a long time to charge an electric vehicle using one of these, but they're available pretty much for everyone. Level 2 chargers require a 240-volt outlet, kind of thing that an electric clothes dryer or an electric stove would use. Slightly more amps, but they charge the electric vehicle much more rapidly. Many people have these in their homes if they have electric vehicles. And then there are DC fast chargers, which at the moment are very, very expensive and are not really available for home installation. Next. So the move to electric vehicles and therefore electric vehicle charging stations is supported by the Climate Action Plan. Next. And also the master plan. And included in the memo from the Environmental Commission that I think you all received are some excerpts from the master plan which discuss electric vehicles. Next. So the next several slides are going to discuss different levels of what might or might not be included in an EVCS ordinance. First slide, this one, shows suggested ordinance elements that are supported by the state of New Jersey and are probably something that are, these four are probably pretty non-controversial. To permit electric vehicle charging stations as accessory use, to have any parking place that has an EVCS in it to count towards the required number of parking places. For projects, major projects designated as redevelopment, to require 10% of the parking spaces be charging stations, and that if possible or if feasible, at least one of these charging stations per lot should be accessible, although it wouldn't necessarily be limited to disabled drivers, and that a clear path go from this charging station to the facility that's providing the parking. Next slide. So the next two slides are going to show some ordinance elements that have been adopted by other New Jersey municipalities. The numbers in parentheses come primarily from the North Brunswick ordinance. And the North Brunswick ordinance is probably one of the most far-reaching ordinances of any that we've looked at. So for all of the uses on this slide, the requirement could be 10% of approved parking spaces. So new multifamily buildings with 5 or more units, that would be apartment houses, hotels, and the numbers are what was suggested by North Brunswick, the triggers. The numbers could be changed to be appropriate for Princeton with the advice of the municipal council. Office developments of more than 2,000 square feet. Warehouse developments, which are probably pretty unlikely in Princeton. Large retail establishments, which could include big box stores, grocery stores, other large buildings, restaurants that are not drive-through restaurants, although today, with today's situation, maybe there are more drive-through restaurants than we would ordinarily have in excess of a certain area, movie theaters, recreation establishments. So all of these would have required 10% of their parking places as having available charging stations. And one of the things that the commission has been talking about is whether Princeton would like to require the entire 10% right away, or whether we'd like to have a certain fraction of the parking charging stations available right away, and then require the people doing the development to have other spots that would be charging station ready, which means that they would have put in conduit so that running the electricity to the future charging station would be simple, fairly straightforward, and not require tearing up the whole parking place again. Next slide. And this is basically a continuation of the previous slide. This would be a requirement for some other commercial uses that would be asked to provide 2 charging stations. So automobile service stations that include a convenience store, drive-in restaurants, and in convenience stores. The last 2 slides, I think, are probably got some things in them that are more controversial than the first one. And now let's go on to the next slide. These are some other possible components of an ordinance that a charging station would be permitted in the front yard of a dwelling as long as it met all other setback requirements. The accessory dwelling units, which have recently been approved by council. If no parking place is provided, then that's fine. If it does provide parking place, then we would like to see a 240 volt outlet provided so that if the person living in the unit wants to install a charging station that's at level 2, they would be able to. And significant redevelopment requires the installation of 10% parking spaces equipped with EVCS in either the garage that's being provided or designated parking areas. Next. So some other things to think about, I think that have been discussed by the Environmental Commission. Is there any way the council can develop some incentives for the installation of these charging stations? So would it be possible to allow business to have more footage than perhaps would be allowed through zoning if they're also installing more charging stations that are required? Could a local business sponsor a charging station, maybe with signage, and be relieved of a certain number of parking spaces as a result? And could a single charging station count as 2 required parking places rather than just 1? Another thing that we think we should be thinking about is how we can provide charging stations to housing developments that have already been built in Princeton. It's kind of like the cart and the horse. You can't have an electric vehicle unless you have a charging station, but you don't want to put in a charging station unless people have electric vehicles. So one possibility that was being looked at before COVID came along was a car sharing program where the company that was going to do this would also provide charging stations. Unfortunately, that company is kind of ceased operation along with COVID. So that's something that we think the community would like to look at, should be looking at. And what's the best pricing structure for affording housing charging stations? Should you have to pay just for the electricity, or should you also pay a premium in order to get to a charging station in the first place? And I gather that this is the ability to get to a charging station may be something that's in one of the recent developments in Princeton. Next. And then some other things for Princeton. Princeton has some areas where residents do not have any off-street parking. Is there any way that we can provide charging stations for those residents? Putting charging stations in municipal lots so that the public has access to them. And while I gather that it's illegal to ask builders to put 240 volt outlets in garages, is there any way that we could at least ask builders to discuss the costs of putting a 240 volt outlet in garages of new homes, so that the homeowner would understand what the cost would be to do the wiring upfront rather than retrofitting later on? Next slide. And then the municipal government is probably going to have to step up as well. So as we replace our gasoline and cars with EVs, they're obviously going to need charging stations for these cars as well, or these vehicles. Would it be possible to make some of these charging stations dual use so that they could be charged by the vehicles of the municipality could use them, but also the public might be able to use them? And then a very practical suggestion that anytime we're tearing up a street or installing new street lights, that perhaps planning can look at whether that site would be appropriate for using the construction to also install some charging stations. Next slide. So thank you for your time. I know I gave you a lot of information in a short time, but this is what we've been thinking about. And we know that some things are very controversial and some things are very uncontroversial. And we need some help from council moving forward.
Okay. Well, first of all, I want to thank you so much for this report and for bringing this to council as a work session. And I would just, in framing this conversation, this is a work session, so it's structured to be a little more informal. So if you're a member of the public listening and you'd like to ask a question or make a comment, please raise your hand, raise your virtual hand, and I can include you also. But I'd like to start with council, and we'll start with Ms. Niedergang and then Ms. Sachs.
Well, I was just going to suggest that we kind of go through the slides in a more methodical way, but maybe I know there are some questions, so maybe we can do that and then go back maybe to some of Anne's slides and kind of sort of try to get some answers to some of the questions that those slides address, because there's, as Anne said, there's a lot of different issues and want to make sure we address them.
Yeah, definitely. Ms. Sachs?
Yeah, I'm really excited about this, and we're a 2 electric car family, and I most of this I didn't see as controversial at all. It all seemed pretty much you know, common sense, and especially as Liz mentioned at the League of Municipalities today, a number of the sessions that I attended emphasized the need to step up our electric charging infrastructure quickly to reach the 80 by 50 goals. So, but I just have two parts of this that I would be very opposed to. One is the front yard charger. We've long tried to discourage people from parking in their front yard, and I think that would not be a direction that we'd want to go in. And the other that I'm really vehemently opposed to, and I have to say somewhat disappointed in the Environmental Commission, is the inclusion of the ADU, because if anyone was listening to the conversation around the ADU ordinance that we passed, or read any of the reports that we based our ADU ordinance on, you would know that one would know that the conversation is really around ADUs right now, is about trying to minimize any restrictions, any hurdles that would in any way impede the construction of ADUs, which are considered to be essential, not only for from an overall sustainability pattern for development purposes, but also for affordability purposes. So I mean, in the future, maybe when Princeton has all the ADUs that we're filled to ADU quota, then we could maybe consider that. But I just want to let you know, as enthusiastic as I am about this ordinance, I would strongly, strongly oppose including that ADU provision in the ordinance. So.
Great, thank you. Mr. Cohen and then Ms. Lambros.
Yeah, so I wanted to just quickly respond to both of Mia's points. In terms of the ADUs, I think we're in the exact same boat as with single family residences. This is not something that we can require. It's a violation of the state rule that we can't require single family and duplex residences to exceed the requirements of the building code. And this is a building code issue. So you don't have to worry about that one. And then in terms of the front yard, I think that, we do have neighborhoods where it's only possible to park in the front yard, the Witherspoon-Jackson neighborhood in particular. And I think that I would be interested in tailoring that particular exception, allowing it in the front yard to, only be allowed in the front yard if that's the only place where parking is available, because I think it is an economic justice issue if we want to make EVs readily available to folks who live in those neighborhoods that are very tight and where there isn't side of the house or backyard parking. I don't think we want to forbid them having the ability to have an EV and a charging station for it.
David, I'm not sure if that's accurate. I mean, I know that.
Hold on. I want to make sure that we sort of have like a structured conversation here. But go ahead.
I'm not sure that that's accurate, David. I know that there was an application that was denied at the zoning board. I guess it was the week before last, and they were asking for some sort of front yard parking. I'm not sure that that's true, that it's allowed, but I mean, I think there are so many other options that were provided in this report for where EV chargers could and should be provided. So I'm not sure that it would need to be in people's front yard. I think there are many other places that we should be providing it. But it seems like,
with the permit parking task force has been doing surveys of where parking is available in these dense neighborhoods, both the Tree Streets and Bank Street and Witherspoon-Jackson. There are a lot of places where parking is in the front yards in those neighborhoods. So.
I'll maybe sort of as feedback back to the Environmental Commission that there needs to be some nuance if it's included on this point, and that we certainly don't want to be encouraging or creating a loophole that allows front yard parking, but maybe there's a way to, if there's existing front yard parking that, the technology is allowed or something, I don't know, but Ms. Lambros?
First of all, this is really exciting, and Commission, thank you for bringing this to our, bringing this up to us. I think there's a lot of things that are really doable. And we can go back through it as Eve mentioned, but like making this, and we were already talking about this, making this as part of new developments, residential developments, that's absolutely possible. If there's other commercial large scale developments, absolutely we can include that. My only caution would be on those small scale new change of use, going to a restaurant type of thing. I noticed the 2,000 square foot number. And when you're talking about, the small businesses, I don't want to impose anything that would be cost prohibitive for opening, particularly in our environment today. But certainly we could look at what kinds of incentives, if a business wanted to have that opportunity, and what kind of incentives we could give. We're already waiving parking requirements for those small businesses with change of use. So that wouldn't be the incentive, but other incentives could be out there, and just doing the right thing for the environment. But I think there's a lot of really exciting, intriguing ideas. So I'm looking forward to exploring all those. So thank you.
Are there any other questions? I see that Kip Cherry has her hand up and wanted to invite her to speak.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm very encouraged to see this, and I just wanted to mention that the Sierra Club has been really pushing electric vehicles, and we've been trying to get a bill passed for an electric school bus pilot program. And it got kind of stuck because a couple of the legislators who were involved apparently were approached by some hydrogen folks, and were temporarily, hopefully, convinced that hydrogen was a better way to go. So now we think we're past that, and it looks like Assemblyman Conaway is going to be our leader. He's a medical doctor and a JD, and we think he's going to be a really good leader, and we're hoping to get this through the legislature quickly. And charging stations are part of the issue, because we want to make it easier for the bus drivers to charge up, and maybe even at their homes. We're not really sure yet. So stay tuned on that. And I think it's a situation where a lot of like minds are coming together right now. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Kip. And sadly, I will not be here next year when you guys are putting the final touches on this. But if I were just to add something, I'd say like this is sort of a rapidly expanding field right now. And so I would just, encourage the council to start with something, and not feel like you have to get it an ordinance that's going to last for a decade. But maybe, with an eye to an ordinance that's going to work for, a couple of years, and then maybe revisit it as, there's more technology and there's maybe more investment and more of a demand. And I think it takes the pressure off a little bit to try to get something perfect when, it's hard to tell what things are going to look like in 5 years, and how do you, put everything in here. And I liked the provision about, requiring at a minimum that it be charging station ready. That seemed to make a whole lot of sense. But anyways, if it's useful for the environmental, go ahead, Mr. Cohen.
Yeah, I did want to make a couple comments that weren't specifically in response to Mia. One of which is, I really like the idea of phasing in the parking requirement. So, rather than saying all 10% have to be installed immediately, that maybe 3 or 5% are installed when triggered, and that you put in the conduit so that you can expand in the future. So I'm really supportive of that. I do think we also need to be careful about the requirements that are triggered by 15% renovation or addition. And I know I was actually in a little pre-work session with the folks who've been working on this, and I brought that up because it is actually in the ordinance for parking spaces generally, where if you make changes to a building that are 15% or more, that you have to bring the parking up to code for the whole building. But I think for this particular type of use, I don't know whether we raise the triggering event, or we don't require, again, all of the parking immediately. But I just think it could be quite onerous if somebody's doing a 15% addition to their building and suddenly, say they have 80 parking spaces and they have to, go out and dig up the parking lot and put in the 8 charging stations, could get quite expensive. So I just think we want to examine that a little more closely.
Ms. Lambros?
A couple more comments. One is we should think about when we do a redesign like we're doing with Witherspoon Street, that is an opportunity for us as a municipality to also commit to doing this. And we've got a lot of plans along the way, Nassau Streetscape and Witherspoon Street. So there's that opportunity. I also just wanted to mention, I was waiting for Councilman Cohen to mention this, but we have a big commitment. We're looking at fleet management changes, and we have a big commitment to the municipality moving to EV. So that would definitely spearhead the movement to having that infrastructure, build. And then the last thing I want to say too is that I really believe that it's going to be consumer driven, that, people who are building new homes and building commercial, they're going to want to have the infrastructure there. They're going to want to have it pre-wired because that's going to make them cost competitive, and because people are going to demand it. So I think that this is very timely, and I think that they should really welcome us taking a leadership role on that.
And we did in the planning meeting discuss really encouraging the building department not to require this, but to have information about it. So anytime someone comes in for a building permit for single family residential, to say, are you sure you don't want to put in that 240 volt outlet in your garage? Because it's a great idea. You're going to be happy you did. And I think if you can do that kind of education in the building department, you're going to get a lot more constructed, because it is a growing thing.
Ms. Niedergang?
And just to follow up on what Councilman Cohen said, to make sure the building department is kept aware of any rebates or grant opportunities. So, you put in an EV charger in a new home that you're building and you get $500 back. So that could also be an incentive. So I guess I just have a question for Anne then, not to cut off conversation if there's more, but it seemed people have better memories than I do, and they're able to identify the issues that they were concerned about. Do you feel like you have the guidance that you need? Do we need to go through? Can I assume that if people didn't object to something, that they were good with it? Do we want to go through in a more system? I don't want to take your lack, if somebody doesn't say anything that they've agreed to, give us the keys to the castle or whatever. But if
I'd be happy to go through the slideshow again.
Yeah, I would also just recommend that you sit down with Derek Bridger, the zoning officer, because I think he has sort of a deep experience in what some of the challenging pieces of this might be. And some of the New Brunswick ordinance or North Brunswick ordinance doesn't apply to Princeton really.
That's
because
right.
of but there might be other things that we'd want to include that they don't, because of just the nature of the businesses we have here. So I think he'd be a really good person that you'd want to consult with, and having that staff review, I think, would be important. And then to in terms of a process before it comes back to council, maybe there can be just a shorter report that whoever the PEC liaison is, whether it's Councilwoman Niedergang or whoever else it might be, can just sort of go back over some of those points and make sure there's a consensus before the ordinance is drafted.
Okay.
But I see Sophie Glovier has her hand up.
Hi, thank
Sophie.
you so much. It's a great discussion. I was just going to try and clarify the process, Mayor. So it sounds like what you'd like is a refinement of what we've heard tonight, to sit down with Derek and to come back with a summary, and then that language would then we would turn it over to be drafted into legal language. Is that correct?
That's right. Yeah, and for some of these, I don't. I think Derek could probably give some guidance if there's any sort of issue with historic districts, and how this might intersect with those, and just there might be other issues too, where you just have to figure out how to thread the needle.
Okay, great.
It seemed like the two issues that we need to really possibly develop very different plans depending on neighborhoods would be the front yard possibility for an EV charger. Are there places where it makes sense and it would be the only available option? And Derek would be very helpful on that. And then Councilwoman Perone Lambrus's concern about some of the smaller businesses. So maybe that 2,000 foot square footage cutoff is the wrong one. And we can also investigate, more the ADU issue. I mean, I guess I'm inclined, if somebody is building an ADU, like dividing their house and spending $50,000 or $60,000 to do this, that the increased costs would be relatively small. On the other hand, if they're like spending $5,000, then it is a substantial cost. So I wonder if there's some way to kind of thread the needle. David is saying
we just can't do it.
It's a single family home.
We
Okay.
can't do it.
Yeah. Okay.
So the only thing you could do with that would be to ask the building department to
make people aware.
Make people aware.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Lots of.
Would you
carrots
like
in
to
this
see
process.
some of the slides again or not? I mean, I can show them, or
I-
Mark can.
It would make more sense for us to go through it at home when we really have time to read through, and then we could get back to Eve if we have any objections. But I think if any of us had any major objections, we would have let you know right now. And the only two things I had were, I mentioned, and everything else for me as a council person, thumbs up. I think it's great. So.
I just want to add to that and say thank you to Anne, and thank you to the PEC for working on this. And I think it's helpful, to see sometimes we don't go through this process at the council meeting, where whenever we have an ordinance in front of us, it's a product of many, many, many little decisions. Some of them big decisions, but it's helpful, I think, to get the input to make sure that the ordinance that comes before us, the council, is comfortable with all the aspects. So we really appreciate that. And just to follow up on what Ms. Sachs said, everybody has their homework to read through it again, and if they have any issues, to get back to either Eve or to Anne or to Sophie. Again, I would say, please meet with Derek and make sure that this is going to fit in without conflicting with other sections of the ordinance. And if there are conflicts, you might need to bring those back so we can figure those out. But just to summarize, and I'll try to hit on everything that I heard. One was, a concern about the front yard setback. The other was, I think there's a support for a phase in.
Mhm.
I think I'm trying to think what else. There's there can't be a restriction for the single family home.
And adjusting some of the footage maybe for
Right.
or a small, based on that was the model. And I think Derek could be very helpful with that. So
Yeah, and I think also adjusting the numbers around how renovation additions are used to trigger a requirement.
right.
In other words, if I want to be clear on this, if 15% is the trigger, so to speak, and they've got 80 parking places, you could require maybe 2 charging stations with pre-wiring for the rest.
Right.
Okay.
Or something. I mean,
something.
Maybe it's a 30% addition renovation that triggers the requirement.
Okay. Okay.
Are there any final comments on this before we move on?
No, I just want to say thank you. You were very receptive. I was kind of worried about some of these suggestions, and they seem to have gone over very well. So thank you all very much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, no, thanks for your work, and thanks for your presentation too. We appreciate it.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye. Okay, so now we come to the actual ordinance part of our meeting, and we're going to start with the public hearing tonight. And this is for ordinance 2020-37, an ordinance to amend and supplement Chapter 10B of the Princeton Code entitled Land Use and the Princeton Zoning Map to create the Affordable Housing 7 AH7 zone and the regulations associated thereto in the municipality of Princeton. And this is regarding 375 Terhune Road. This ordinance was sent to the planning board for review, and I wanted to ask Michael Laplace, if he's here, if he can just report on the planning board.
Thank you, Mayor. Mayor, members of the council. The planning board did review this proposed ordinance and discussed it in regards to the master plan and found it to be consistent with the goals and objectives of the community master plan, mostly focusing on issues such as creating a diversity of housing, placing new housing opportunities close to sections of town where there was already infrastructure in place, where there's existing transit, where there's shopping and professional services nearby. And this location provides all those opportunities. It's an interesting zone change in that it will allow for infill development, which will be compact, and it will.
Oops, we lost, or I lost you. I don't know if everybody else lost you too.
We have, Mayor.
Michael, we can't hear you. I don't know why. I don't know if he can hear us.
Okay,
well,
us either.
I think we got the gist of it, so thank you. There's something not working with your computer, but we heard most of that, so that was good. Thank you. Okay. We also have Michael, the other Michael Sullivan here, who's been helping to provide planning services for this ordinance, and just wanted to turn it over to you to see if you have any comments before the public hearing.
Well, I can just give a quick summary of the ordinance for everyone's benefit. This is an ordinance, as you know, Princeton had a settlement of their affordable housing litigation, which was approved at a fairness hearing back in February. At that time, the owner of 375 Terhune attempted to intervene in objecting to the settlement. They were unsuccessful and were not admitted, but nevertheless, Princeton Affordable Housing Committee proceeded to negotiate to avoid any further interference, but also to derive a few public benefits, including a bit more affordable housing and some access issues. So that resulted in this zone, which is located along 375 Terhune Avenue, block 7401, lots 4.01 and 4.02. If you'd like, I can pull up a zoning map to show folks. Would that be helpful?
Sure, thank you.
Okay. And the zoning map. Can you see that?
We
No.
can.
Yes?
No.
Are you sharing your screen, Michael?
Let me try that again. Share content, share screen. Okay. How about now?
Nope.
Just showing your name. It's the screen that comes on when you pause your video.
Oh, okay.
Is it
For some reason, it's not. I'm not able to pull it up.
Michael, is it the zoning map that's in the packet that you're trying to?
Yes. Yes.
Oh, I can share my screen then. Let me see if I can
Thank
do it.
you.
Does that
Thank
help?
you. Thank you very much. Yes. So the zone is hatched here, AH7, and it's you can see it's along Terhune Road across the intersection from Thanet Road, and it backs up to some homes that front on Grover Avenue. Grover Park is to the south, and the shopping center and the adjacent what's known as the comfort site in the AH5 zone are to the west. It encompasses the entirety of the 375 property. This zone creates a set of regulations that provides for inclusionary housing development, which would be 20% affordable units at 80% market unit. And this ordinance specifically permits the development of 24 townhouses and 6 apartments in 2 buildings. Through the process, there was a concept plan developed. And this concept plan, I don't have it. I don't think I'm able to share it. Was developed to ensure that the apartments along Terhune were developed in such a way that they were in 2 buildings, 3 apartments per building, that those homes reflected the scale and the arrangement of homes, single-family homes that would be in the area around Terhune, with the townhouses being arrayed behind the apartment buildings that would front on Terhune. There will be a new road on the west side, which would provide access to the new homes, as well as including a wider shared path that would be a connection between Terhune Road and Grover Park, and ultimately perhaps the shopping center itself to provide for residents there. What's interesting about the plan is that it requires alley access only for the townhouses. It does not permit direct access from Terhune Road to any of the new homes. And it also requires courtyards, green courtyards, to be developed between the homes, the townhouses that face each other. It will require a buffer and a 35-foot setback between the existing single-family homes and also Grover Park. And there would be a 15-foot wide vegetated buffer that would be required along those frontages as well, and that would be deed restricted to ensure the maintenance of that buffer. Bicycle parking would be required for the apartment buildings. The 2 multifamily buildings, they don't have garages. They would have off-street parking on the surface. So providing weather protected bicycle parking is desirable there, whereby the townhouses would have garages to store their bicycles and other things. Altogether, this zone will allow for 30 total homes, 20%. The apartments would be affordable. The townhouse will be for market rate families, and the regulations will ensure that the development is consistent with the concept plan that was negotiated to provide for this. It was a planning, then design, and then the zoning. That's how the regulations were built in this case. So I'm sorry my exhibits didn't function the way I anticipated them. The iPad's a little different from the PC or laptop. If there are any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
That's okay. I think I have the concept plan I can share if that would be helpful. And it was at the last meeting, but let me see if I can get this one to work.
Yeah, I was looking for it.
Can people see that?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, so the concept plan here, you can see Terhune Road is at the top of the screen. And the orange or yellow orange represent the residential buildings. You can see the two smaller buildings along Terhune, which are broken up. Those are where the apartments are. Then as you move towards the bottom of the page, you can see there are 4 townhouse buildings organized with courtyards between the fronts and then alley access in the back. To the left, you can see the new planned roadway with the narrow sidewalk adjacent to the buildings, the new homes, and then a wider sidewalk in a red russet color that would be that shared path that would connect Terhune Road to the park.
Great, thank you. Okay, so I want to first start to see if there's any questions from council before we open up the public hearing. Ms. Pearl-Lambros, did you have a question?
I just wanted to add, I'm not sure if it was emphasized or not, but these will all be homes that are for purchase, including the affordable. So it's something where we feel that we were adding to the inventory of homes, that would be more affordable in the community. So I just wanted to mention that.
Great, thank you. Anybody else? Okay, I'd like to open up the public hearing for this ordinance, and you can indicate you'd like to speak the same way we do for public comments. If you can raise your virtual hand if you'd like to make a comment.
I don't see anyone here for this ordinance.
I don't either. Okay, well, I'd like to close the public comment then.
Mayor, we have all the emails.
That's not for this though.
That's for a different.
That's a different.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. You're right.
Resolution.
Never mind.
Okay. Well, I'd like to bring it back to council, and I think we made some of these comments at the introduction, but I think it's remarkable actually that there's no public comment on this at this point, but I do want to thank the subcommittee, and I also want to thank the Barskis for really coming, and the staff and our planners for, I see now that I'm stalling here, I'll reopen the public hearing again because I see that Janet Haru has a comment. So Janet, go ahead. Or maybe you have to be brought over. There we go. Go ahead.
Me?
Yep, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm not sure I understand that road that goes along the apartments. I know that there's I thought that there was going to be some multi-use path that went through to the shopping center. Will that be in addition to this road? You know what I'm talking about?
It's a continuation of that road, I think is the right answer. I can bring it back up on the screen if that would help.
I think that would help.
Okay, let me.
path that was shown to the west of the road.
To the left there.
What? It's to the
Yeah.
west, to the
Right,
west
on the
of the
left.
road, which is on the left side. That's a 10-foot wide shared path next to the road, Janet.
So that just goes into Grover Park. It ends there and it goes into Grover Park.
We will make the connection. There are still some questions about working with the site next to this on the corner of Harrison and Terhune about exactly how we'll work with them to make the connection, but we will make the connection.
With the road or just with the road or just the multi-use path?
Janet, the situation with the road is that we don't know what's going to happen with the road, right? I think for the time being, it is only a through. It's only a throughway for the multi-use path. There are Councilman Cohen, as you've discussed with him, is in favor of making it a vehicular throughway. There are differences of perspectives on that, but it may not even be possible because it would require Edens to agree to it. So it's not an issue that's being discussed tonight.
All right, thank you.
It's not an issue
Thanks.
that we're deciding one way or another tonight.
Also, just how many units are in those 2 apartment buildings that are on Terhune?
There's 3 each.
Okay.
So 6 total.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you.
All set. Yep.
Okay. All right. Are there any other public comments? Okay, I'm going to close the public hearing again, and I was just complimenting the subcommittee for this design and for putting something together that is, that fits in with the neighborhood in, I think, stylistically, and creates this connection to the shopping center that I think is going to be of real benefit to the surrounding neighbors. So I just want to compliment you and see if there's any other comments from council or if there's a motion to approve.
Make a motion.
Moved by Ms. Pearl-Lambros. Is there a second? Seconded by Ms. Sachs. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Ms. Pearl-Lambros,
Yes.
Ms. Niedergang,
Yes.
Mr. Cohen,
Yes.
Ms. Fraga,
Yes.
Mr. Williamson,
Yes.
Ms. Sachs.
Yes.
The ordinance passes unanimously, and now we come to ordinance introductions. Thank you, Michael,
Good
very
night,
much.
folks. Be well.
Good night.
Thank you.
We come to ordinance introductions, of which we have quite a few this evening. The first is ordinance 2020-43, an ordinance by the municipality of Princeton requiring the provision of bicycle parking, establishing standards, therefore, and amending Articles 10 site plans and 11 zoning in Chapter 10B of the Code of the Township of Princeton, New Jersey, 1968. And let's see, I wanted to ask Council President Cohen if you wanted to make any comments about this ordinance, because I know you've been working hard on it in its various iterations.
Sure. Just briefly, the requirements are based on recommendations that came out of the Bike Master Plan study in 2017. That study also recommended adopting a bicycle parking ordinance. So it's taken us a few years to do that, but that master plan was adopted into the bike mobility plan was adopted into the master plan. And so these are goals that we've had as a community since then. And it's just coming to fruition now. I think it's a really great thing.
Great, thank you. Are there any questions from council about this ordinance? All right, is there a motion to introduce?
So moved.
Okay, moved by Mr. Cohen, seconded by Ms. Sachs. Any questions or comments before? Oh, I see that Kristen Applegate has a comment. Go ahead, Kristen.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Thank you for a moment. I just wanted to follow on the comment that Councilman Cohen made at the beginning of the meeting. The university is, I'm sorry, it's Kristen Applegate, Director of Community and Regional Affairs for the university. We're certainly very supportive of following the bike master plan for the community and establishing bike parking requirements. We appreciate the time that Councilman Cohen has spent with us in talking about appropriate requirements for higher education institutions. And as he mentioned earlier, we'll look forward to continuing to work with him and hopefully have potentially a revision to this for early next year.
Great, thanks. All right, so I was asking if there are any comments or questions before we take a vote for introduction. All right, Madam Clerk, can you please call the roll?
Ms. Perron-Lambros?
Yes.
Ms. Niedergang?
Yes.
Mr. Cohen?
Yes.
Ms. Fraga?
Yes.
Mr. Williamson?
Yes.
Ms. Sachs?
Yes.
Okay, so the ordinance has been introduced and the public hearing will be on December 7th, 2020. Next is ordinance 2020-44, an ordinance by the municipality of Princeton regulating speed limits on Terhune Road and amending the code of the Township of Princeton, New Jersey, 1968. And I'd like to welcome our municipal engineer, Deanna Stockton. And do you want to make some comments about this ordinance?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Before you tonight is an ordinance to amend the speed limit on Terhune Road. Its purpose is twofold. One is to lower the speed limit between North Harrison Street North and Meadowbrook Road. This is a change from what you actually see in the written ordinance. But we are proposing to extend the limit of the 25-mile-an-hour speed limit from Randall, as it's stated in the ordinance before you, to Meadowbrook Road. And I'll go into the reasoning behind that in a minute. But the other purpose of the ordinance is just to clean up the municipal code book. We found in writing this ordinance that there was a section of roadway that was not covered by ordinance, and then there were conflicting references to speed limits. So that was the purpose. Those two items were the purpose for the ordinance. In regards to extending the 25-mile-an-hour limit from Randall Road to Meadowbrook Road, we found that if we moved the speed limit to 35 starting at Randall, that actually would result in an increase in a speed limit between Randall Road and Meadowbrook Road, because it is currently 30 miles an hour. Because we do have a crosswalk at Meadowbrook Road, and there is pedestrian activity and bicycle activity along the corridor to parks and schools, just the same conditions that we noted for the other portion of the roadway from Harrison Street North to Randall. We felt that it was in the best interest to make the update to the ordinance to extend that 25-mile-an-hour speed limit to Meadowbrook Road. And so I will work with Trishka's office to update the ordinance so that it can be published tomorrow with the corrected limits, and it will be available for the public hearing as well.
Great, thank you. Are there any council questions on this ordinance? Ms. Niedergang?
Not so much a question. First of all, I'm very excited to see this. It's a road that speeding complaints have been coming for a long time. So I think the residents will be happy, and I think it's really a great thing. But I guess if what's the expression? Give somebody an inch, they want to take a mile. So I'd be curious to know how broadly applicable this ability to lower the speed limit from 30 or 35 to 25, because I am sure that the residents of this road are not the only ones who would like to see that happen. I wonder if you can just give a sketch of why it's possible in this instance. Sorry to put you on the spot, and in what other, some, I know obviously if it's a road we don't control, that we can't change the speed limit, but I'd love to see this done, on other streets where we've had similar issues come up. So thank you.
Sure. So I did document some of the state law that allows for this in the memorandum. But basically what it is that any road that is wholly contained within our municipality and is in our jurisdiction, we have the ability to set speed limits. But obviously we have to do it based on something. And in this case, the way we looked at it is the state law definition for a residential district. And it allows, by measuring the amount of residential structure for a given stretch of roadway, in this case, it was 300 feet of residential structure for 600 feet of roadway. And if you qualify under that classification, then state law indicates that a reasonable speed limit is 25 miles an hour. There's also a suburban residential classification, which has less frontage, more road space, and that establishes a 35 mile an hour speed limit. But again, because the roadway is wholly in our control and in our within the municipality, we have the discretion to consider various things like the presence or absence of sidewalks, the routes that the pedestrians and bicyclists are accessing, for, the parks and the schools and the community centers. So there are, I can think of at least one other location that we may want to look at and reconsider the speed limit, and that would be Mount Lucas Road from Cherry Hill to Ewing, because I think that's also a 30 mile an hour road right now. And so we may want to revisit that to 25 mile an hour. The big difference between the two locations, though, is just the immense amount of development of residential units that is proposed for the Cherry Road area. The fact that we have, about 400 new dwelling units that are going in that area and creating traffic where there is no really dedicated development, say in that Mount Lucas corridor, that would impact the existing traffic. So it's something that we will be looking at. We'll work with the police to look at that and see if it's appropriate to also revisit that speed limit. We'll do that in 2021.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Are there any other questions or comments on this ordinance? Okay. Is there a motion to introduce? Moved by Ms. Sachs, seconded by Mr. Cohen. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Ms. Pearl-Ambrose,
Yes.
Ms. Niedergang,
Yes.
Mr. Cohen,
Yes.
Ms. Fraga,
Yes.
Mr. Williamson,
Yes.
Ms. Sachs.
Yes.
Okay, so this ordinance has been introduced and the public hearing will be on December 7th. Okay, next we come to several ordinances that were sort of previewed at a prior meeting that have to do with code harmonization. And I see Lisa Maddox here. Thank you for joining us. The attorney that's been helping us with the code harmonization effort. And I mean, we should just take these one by one. So if we want to start with ordinance 2020-45, an ordinance by the municipality of Princeton regarding government records and administrative fees, the health department and the Princeton Township Redevelopment Agency, and amending chapter 2, the Code of the Borough of Princeton, New Jersey, 1974, and chapter 2, the Code of the Township of Princeton, New Jersey, 1968. Is there anything that council should be aware of for this ordinance?
Thank you, Mayor. We had put together a memo on November 12th, but I can definitely summarize some of the major points from that memo. This ordinance has several purposes. First, it updates the language for consistency with the Government Records Council requirements for Oprah fees, and specifically the special service charges that may be assessed when there are certain requests for government records. So that was updated to ensure compliance with the GRC's guidance. The second goal of this ordinance updates some miscellaneous administrative fees that as a result, again, of Oprah fee updates in the past needed to be updated here. And there were a couple of other relatively minor changes. For instance, there's a street map that's sold by the clerk's office, and it currently has a fee of $1. So that was updated to provide a more accurate charge. And let's see, the vital records under chapter 2 that were charged for marriage and death records and things like that, the fees haven't been changed, but the language is updated to ensure that there's recognition of the consolidated municipality. The third goal of this ordinance is to update the language to remove some outdated provisions, and in particular the language that provides for the Princeton Township Redevelopment Agency, which essentially has been replaced under the new statutes under the local redevelopment and housing law. So there is no longer a Princeton Township, obviously, redevelopment agency. So the redevelopment law that's in place is it's provided for under the the municipal land use law, so that renders these sections obsolete. So that was taken out of chapter 2. And then the last change is, I don't know if Mark wants to speak to this at all, but there is the formal designation of the Department of Health added to chapter 2 under the commissions and agency provisions. And it's the only new portion is really to create a director of the Department of Health who will be the health officer. So in terms of administration, it won't be any different than the way it's currently run. And under this department, there will be two divisions, the Division of Housing and the Division of Animal Control. And again, these are already divisions that are handled under the Department of Health. So it's more of a formal establishment as opposed to anything new, except for the designation of a director of the department. And Mark, I didn't know if you wanted to add
just for some
anything.
clarification in terms of the departments, this will create the health department. As we can see from the earlier conversation with Mr. Grosser, just a need with the pandemic for really this new Department of Health. In addition to that, we brought into the Department of Health two divisions, one being animal control, the other is transferring the Housing Bureau. And I want to make it clear what the Housing Bureau is. That is our division that deals with housing maintenance. That is currently within the Department of Emergency Services. That inspection, property maintenance inspections, will be moved over to the health department. One of the rationales for doing that at this point is those inspections for property maintenance coincide all the time with nuisance inspections done through the health department. By bringing these two departments together, we'll get some synergies in actually dealing with some issues. And as we talked about before, this whole health crisis, there are a number of social economic reasons for it. And we believe we can provide a better service with the two departments working together.
Great, thank you. Are there any questions for either Mark or Lisa on this from council? Is there a motion to introduce ordinance 2020-45? Moved by Ms. Fraga. Is there a second? Seconded by Ms. Niedergang. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Ms. Perron-Lambros?
Yes.
Ms. Niedergang?
Yes.
Mr. Cohen?
Yes.
Ms. Fraga?
Yes.
Mr. Williamson? Ms. Sachs?
Yes.
So this ordinance has been introduced and the public hearing will be on December 7th, 2020. Next is ordinance 2020-46, an ordinance by the municipality of Princeton concerning advertising and banners in the public right-of-way and amending the code of the borough of Princeton 1974 and the code of the township of Princeton, New Jersey 1968. Ms. Maddox, I don't know if there's any further on this one. I mean, I think this one's pretty routine.
It is. It's the goal is really to ensure that all the advertising and similar provisions are in one place under the new code, and that would be Chapter 14. And the banner requirements haven't changed. They're just brought from the borough code and put into the township code.
Great. Are there any questions on this one? And if not, is there a motion to introduce? Moved by Mr. Cohen, seconded by Ms. Perron-Lambros. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Ms. Perron-Lambros?
Yes.
Ms. Niedergang?
Yes.
Mr. Cohen?
Yes.
Ms. Fraga?
Yes.
Mr. Williamson?
Dwayne, you're muted.
Oh, I said yes.
Thank you.
You were muted.
Oh, but I pushed the button and I saw the mute come off when I said it. I'm sorry. Well, yes again.
Thank you. Ms. Sachs?
Yes.
Okay, this ordinance has been introduced unanimously and the public hearing will be on December 7th, 2020. Next is ordinance 2020-47, an ordinance by the municipality of Princeton concerning finance, taxation, and joint purchasing, and amending chapters 2 and 13 of the Code of the Borough of Princeton, New Jersey, 1974, and chapter 7 and 10A of the Code of the Township of Princeton, New Jersey, 1968. Ms. Maddox, any words of wisdom on this ordinance?
No, again, it's pretty routine, and the goal is to really bring the two codes together insofar as they deal with payroll and finance. So in terms of substance, there really aren't any changes. But there was one item that Sandy had contacted me about this afternoon that it's just language that needs to be corrected under section 7-1, which I believe is on page 2 of the ordinance. There are 5 references to treasurer, and that's really, that was the term used for the CFO in the township. So instead of treasurer, there are 5 different spots under that section where instead of treasurer, it should read the CFO or the Chief Financial Officer instead. So we can make that change I guess the idea would be to make a motion to make that change if that's okay with you at this point, and then that would be in the version that's introduced.
Okay. Ms. Perron-Lambros?
So I was going to say, should we make a motion with the amendment?
Well, I think can we just introduce the ordinance with the changes that you've recommended with the CFO
yes,
changes?
That's fine. Yeah, that's fine too. Since it hasn't actually been introduced yet, with the changing the 5 references to from treasurer to the chief financial officer.
Okay.
Under section.
Are you
7.
making that motion?
Make a motion with those changes, yes.
Okay, and it's being seconded by Ms. Niedergang. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Ms. Perron-Lambros?
Yes.
Ms. Niedergang?
Yes.
Mr. Cohen?
Yes.
Ms. Fraga,
Yes.
Mr. Williamson,
Yes.
Ms. Sacks.
Yes.
Okay, the ordinance has been introduced and the public hearing will be on December 7th, 2020. Next is ordinance 2020-48, an ordinance by the municipality of Princeton concerning the defense, indemnification, and compensation of municipal employees and amending Chapter 11A of the Code of the Borough of Princeton, New Jersey, 1974, and Chapter 6A and 14A of the Code of the Township of Princeton, New Jersey, 1968. And again, I'd like to invite Ms. Maddox to, if there's anything that council should be aware of in this harmonization.
No, not on this ordinance. Again, it's the goal is to just ensure that the provisions of both codes are brought together in one location. And the original language from both codes was nearly identical in terms of indemnification and defensive actions. So this ordinance really just ensures that the one provision will apply throughout the consolidated municipality. Yep, and then it just removes from the township code as a result of this change the duplicated provisions under Chapter 6A. And then there was one other chapter that was removed that was under the township code, Chapter 15A, that dealt with personnel. And it was a provision that's codified, but it dealt with salaries and compensation, and it was sort of a snapshot from one period of time. So in discussions with administration, it was decided that it should appropriately be removed from the code because it's handled annually through the salary ordinance.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions on this, or is there a motion to introduce? Moved by Ms. Sacks, seconded by Ms. Niedergang. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Ms. Perrin-Lambros,
Yes.
Ms. Niedergang,
Yes.
Mr. Cohen,
Yes.
Ms. Fraga,
Yes.
Mr. Williamson, Ms. Sacks.
Yes.
So the ordinance has been introduced. The public hearing will be on December 7th, 2020. Next is ordinance 2020-49, an ordinance by the municipality of Princeton concerning parades and special events and amending the Code of the Borough of Princeton, New Jersey, 1974, and the Code of the Township of Princeton, New Jersey, 1968. Again, Ms. Maddox, anything that you want to draw our attention to?
Mayor, this ordinance had been reviewed over the past couple of years with the police department and the clerk's office, and there are substantive changes when you look at the two original ordinances, but the goal is to really codify the current process and procedures that are used by the clerk's office and the police department when it comes to parades and other organized events that use the public streets and the public sidewalks. So it's, substantively, it is different than what's on the books right now, but in terms of process, it's very much consistent with what the procedures currently are. And then that's the first article that deals with the parades and the other events that take place in the public right away. The second article is from the Township Code, and that dealt with some events that took place at Yasna Polana years ago. And there haven't been, in their large scale golf events, and there haven't been any similar events in recent years, but the clerk's office and administration concluded that it's a good idea to keep those provisions in place in case there is such an event in the future.
Okay, great, thank you. Are there any questions on this one, or is there a motion to introduce? Moved by Ms. Sacks, seconded by Mr. Cohen. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Ms. Perrin-Lambros,
Yes.
Ms. Niedergang,
Yes.
Mr. Cohen,
Yes.
Ms. Fraga,
Yes.
Mr. Williamson,
Yes.
Ms. Sacks.
Yes.
So this ordinance has been introduced and the public hearing will be on December 7th, 2020. And I just want to give a shout out and a thank you to Lisa Maddox and the members of the Code Harmonization Group. This is painstaking work, which I think council just experienced for about a half hour, but it's, you know, it's really necessary, and we appreciate all of your efforts. So thank you.
Thank you.
There's still a little bit more. Yeah, Ms. Sachs.
I just want to say that Ms. Maddox and well, in particular has and all of our attorneys have let us know that it's actually a good idea on a regular basis to do code house cleaning. So, and most of these ordinances are from my childhood, which, and so we are hoping going forward in the new year to actually have a committee that just focuses on hopefully the consolidation part will be done, but that going forward, we're hoping that council will on a regular basis do house cleaning of its ordinances so that no future council will be stuck with all of this. And
It's a very good idea.
Yeah, that's really smart. I remember my one of my first zoning ordinances I was looking at had to do with the regulation of haberdasheries, which I had to look up, I will admit.
You haven't read enough 19th century novels.
I guess not, yeah. Okay, then we have the final ordinance tonight that's slated for introduction, ordinance 2020-50 of the Mayor and Council of Princeton concerning salaries and compensation of certain personnel of the municipality of Princeton. And Mr. DeShield, did you want to walk us through the changes in this one?
Yes, Mayor. This ordinance, really what it does, it creates the position of the Director of Health. It's a companion to the earlier ordinance that you saw earlier. It actually lays out the Director of Health within the range of Class 2. In addition to that, we did some cleaning up in the actual salary ordinance itself, including two things. One, there was two director levels. We just collapsed those into one level. So the department directors, there's used to be a senior and a department director. We collapsed it into one level called the department director. And then we went through the ordinance. Those places where there were people at the very top of the range, we increased the range just a bit. This would allow for council and the personnel committee this year as we go through and make a decision on COLAs. It would allow us to give out COLA increases. It's approved by council.
Great, thank you. And this was reviewed by the Personnel Committee and is coming to council with the recommendation of the Personnel Committee. Are there any questions on this ordinance, or is there a motion to approve? Moved by Ms. Fraga, seconded by Ms. Niedergang. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Ms. Pearl-Lambros?
Yes.
Ms. Niedergang?
Yes.
Mr. Cohen?
Yes.
Ms. Fraga?
Yes.
Mr. Williamson? Ms. Sachs?
Yes.
Okay, this ordinance has been successfully introduced and the public hearing will be on December 7th, 2020. Okay, now we come to resolutions. First resolution is 2366, resolution authorizing with NASA HKT Urban Renewal Associates LLC financial agreement extension. And is there a motion to approve to get it on the table? Moved by Ms. Pearl-Lambros. Is there a second? Seconded by Mr. Williamson. And Mr. DeShield, did you have any comments on this or wanted to
Sure, just
bring
to
anything to council attention?
Just a quick comment. This is the financial agreement and lease agreement on the property. It's being renewed for an additional 10 years at the same terms as the first negotiated agreement. There's really been no change. It's just an extension of it for an additional 10 years.
Okay. Go ahead, Mr. Pearl-Lambros.
I just was going to, sorry, there's football in the background. I just wanted to clarify that this is both the retail and residential building, right? This is the whole complex?
That's correct.
Okay. and, you know, and given the situation with COVID and all, I'm sure it's, you know, difficult times. So, okay. All right.
Was there any negotiation, or is this just a standard renewal? You know, I'm just wondering what is the procedure? Is this just, does it just sort of renew automatically, or?
Quite frankly, under the redevelopment law, we're getting the 15%, which is the standard. So it's kind of a standard renewal at this time.
Okay.
Okay. Are there any other questions on this? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, I think everybody voted. So I'm going to say that passed unanimously. And the next resolution is 2367, resolution amending a professional services agreement with Scare and C and Hollenbeck LLC and John M. Scagnelli Esquire, an amount not to exceed an additional $17,500, making the total contract amount not to exceed $67,500 for professional legal services. And this is the defense of the New Jersey DEP solid waste enforcement action at 298 River Road. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Cohen, seconded by Mr. Williamson. Are there any questions on this resolution? Ms. Niedergang?
Just want to review, Mr. DeShields. I know you said there was like a kind of drop dead date when we give up hoping that the insurance company was going to pay. And what was that date?
Last week, the attorney issued a 10-day letter. I'm not sure the exact date, but roughly 10 days from the date being sent to the insurance carrier is the drop dead date. But what that means in terms of us, we'll be looking to bring the contract to move this forward at the next meeting, regardless of whether they approve it or not. If they don't approve it, we will act with them on using our legal means.
Okay, will you keep us
Absolutely.
informed about that? Thank you.
Miss Sachs?
Seems really outrageous. I'm wondering if we should consider changing insurance companies and if we could have that discussion.
We can have the discussion. It's something we could talk about.
Okay, let's have that discussion.
But the insurance company is always great until you make a claim. So, you know, I assume, I'm not to say that you're wrong at all, but, you know, I think we were all very glad when this incident, you know, was uncovered that we had this insurance, and, you know, unfortunately, it's not worth much if they won't pay.
In the realm of you know, outrageous insurance company behavior, this seems to be particularly outside the margins. At least worth considering whether we want to continue to give them.
It's a very good point and always worth reviewing. Yeah.
Okay. Are there any other questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Resolution passes unanimously. Next is 2368, resolution approving the 2020 through 2024 collective negotiations agreement with New Jersey State Policemen's Benevolent Association, Incorporated, Local 130. And wanted to ask Mr. DeShield to walk us through the highlights of this contract with the PBA.
Thank you, Mayor. As you can see, this is a 5-year contract negotiated with the PBA. The current contract expired in 2020. This will be a 5-year contract to 2024. The increases on an annual basis will be in 2020 a 1.75, in 2021 a 1.75, 2022 a 2.75, 2023 a 2.75, and 2024 a 2.25. In addition to that, there are a number of contract changes in language in the contract was modified, mostly to deal with just dealing with clarifying language. Some of the highlights of those changes in one area in terms of scheduling changes, we negotiated a change in the scheduling language that would modify it, that allows officers who are on either specialty units or in a detective bureau to actually be used if an officer is out sick to fill in for that officer and thereby eliminating the need for overtime. In addition to that, there were a number of places where we just cleaned up language, just clarifying a number of issues.
Great, thank you. Are there any questions on the contract? Is there a motion to approve? Moved by Ms. Fraga, seconded by Ms. Perrin-Lambros. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, the resolution passes unanimously. And now we come to the consent agenda. I know there were some comments that came in on one of these, so I would recommend that we take.
20-371.
Correct. So I recommend that we take 2371 separately. So 2371 is resolution supporting New Jersey Assembly Bill number 4034, Senate Bill number 2340, the People's Bill, which provides eviction protection for those economically impacted during the time of the coronavirus pandemic. And to relieve you all from hearing me read through all of the emails that have come in on this, Councilman Niedergang has volunteered to read those comments into the record. And
do you need a motion to remove it?
Yeah, why don't we get it on the
agenda?
table? So is there a motion to approve? Moved by Ms. Perrin-Lambros, seconded by Mr. Williamson. And we'll start with the comment that came in. And I would say, if we read your comment, then, it's, that will be your comment.
Mayor,
so
do we want to start with live
maybe,
comments, and then I'll just read the people who.
Okay, that's a good idea. Okay, so why don't we start with the people who are still tuned in? If anybody would like to make a comment, and I'll get to you in a second, but if you're a member of the public and you'd like to make a comment on this resolution, you can raise your virtual hand. If you sent in a comment, we could also, we'll also read that if you don't make if you don't raise your hand. Ms. Sachs, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I just had a question. I didn't we have a new policy where we were people who were emailing in, I guess it's people who were sending in emails, they were just automatically put in the minutes. We weren't going to be reading them. They were just being put in the minutes. Wasn't that our?
We did have that policy.
Yeah, but under the Division of Local Government Services guidelines for remote public meetings, which are going to be turned into, they're emergency regulations now, they're being proposed as permanent regulations. Written or emailed comments have to be read into the record, subject, if you have a time limit for speakers, then it's the same time limit as you're reading the emails, but they do require that they be read into the record.
Okay.
So Ms. Niedergang, why don't you go ahead? I don't see any hands
there were
up.
nobody's hands up. Okay. This is from first emails from Dozier Hammond. Dear Mayor and Council members, I am writing as chair of the Princeton Affordable Housing Board. We urge you all to strongly support Resolution 2371 that urges passage of NJ Bill S 2340 A 4034, the People's Bill. This bill will provide greatly needed protection for homeowners, tenants, and landlords during our current COVID-19 health and economic crisis. It will prevent eviction and homelessness, especially among our frontline workers and our most economically disadvantaged, who have been disproportionately affected. And it has gained support from over 100 organizations across the state. Thank you for your consideration. Dozier Hammond, Chair of the Princeton Affordable Housing Board. This next one comes from John Heilner. Dear Mayor Lempert, I write on my own behalf and not as a member of the Human Services Commission. I strongly support our Princeton resolution, which in turn supports New Jersey Assembly Bill number 4034, Senate Bill number 2340, the People's Bill, which provides eviction protection for those economically impacted during the time of the coronavirus pandemic. In my own work with the immigrant communities in both Princeton and Trenton, I have seen how disproportionately low-income families and people of color have been affected by the pandemic, both health-wise and in their struggles to pay their bills. Many have lost their jobs, which have not yet returned, especially restaurant workers, or their hours have been severely reduced. Often a family with 2 wage earners is now receiving only one income, or less than what one was earning before. These neighbors of ours must be protected from eviction and homelessness. I also like that the bill entitles property owners to receive a forbearance that extends their mortgage terms with no additional fees or interest. While some property owners, especially those who rent to low-income workers, can afford a reduction in their rental income, some cannot. I've heard it said that this reduction in mortgage payments might leave banks holding the bag. I would ask those banks, have you shared the pain that so many of our neighbors are experiencing? How much have you reduced the salaries of your top executives? What expenditures have you put on hold? If you pay dividends to shareholders, have you reduced them? Have you refrained from stock buybacks? This is from Erica DeGlau. I hope I pronounced that correctly. To Princeton Council. I'm writing in support of the proposed resolution in support of People's Bill A4034 and currently under consideration by the New Jersey Senate as S2340. I've been a resident of Princeton for over 20 years and professionally direct a program at Rutgers that enables human services employees across New Jersey to pursue their MSW while remaining in the workforce. As a social worker, I am acutely aware of the economic strains that the pandemic has placed on low and moderate income members of our community and the threat of potential eviction that looms. Beyond Princeton, I have heard far too many stories about COVID-related economic insecurity faced by individuals and families that my students serve, and too often that concerns their own families. This is an unprecedented time for our state and our country, and New Jersey State Legislature must take the needed steps to ensure that families are protected against eviction and homelessness, the costs of which would be more devastating to our economy and our communities than any financial impacts that the bill might entail. New Jersey's response is especially critical given the uncertainties of a timely federal response during the coming months. I hope Princeton will be on the right side of this issue. This is from Matt Melzeko. I'm sorry again if I'm mispronouncing that. These are comments for tonight's council meeting regarding resolution 2371. I would like to signal my support for this resolution. Communities across the country, including many in New Jersey, are already seeing a significant number of eviction filings, despite a CDC moratorium and several statewide moratoria on evictions. The People's Bill goes farther than those moratoria by establishing a framework for repayment of rental, arrearage, and mortgage forbearance, which helps tenants, landlords, and affordable housing providers. It also perfects tenants by forbidding the reporting of non-payment information to collection or credit reporting agencies during the COVID-19 state of emergency, a time when so many households are facing job loss or substantial loss of income through no fault of their own. We are facing a historic housing crisis, which should motivate all levels of government to do all that they can to provide relief to homeowners and renters. I applaud the council for supporting this bill. Thank you. And I think this, and there's 2 more. This one is from Ed Truselli, who is the Executive Director of Princeton Community Housing. Dear Mayor and Council, I'm writing in my capacity as Executive Director of Princeton Community Housing in regard to Resolution 2371, the People's Bill. As a member of the Housing and Community Development Network of New Jersey, Princeton Community Housing advocates for the adoption of the People's Bill and thanks the Princeton Mayor and Council for this resolution. In addition to providing rent relief to our residents in need because of the impact of the pandemic, Princeton Community Housing is also using payment agreements, a strategy outlined in the bill, to keep people in their homes. The People's Bill will help renters and avoid eviction and will help homeowners and landlords of single and multifamily homes avoid mortgage default by creating pauses and repayment plans on their rent and mortgage payments. Thank you again for your support. And 2 more. from Carol Golden. I would like to submit this comment. As chair of Housing Initiatives of Princeton, I want to lend my support to this resolution, which articulates Princeton's support of New Jersey Assembly Bill number 4034, Senate Bill number 2340, the People's Bill. This bill, while not a panacea, provides some protections for renters and homeowners who are struggling during this COVID pandemic to make the payments needed to stay safely in their homes. At HIP, we know that so many in our community who have been hit economically by the pandemic are not able to keep up with their rent. This bill continues a commitment to an eviction moratorium while New Jersey is at a state of emergency and will at least provide some people with a path to a repayment plan. In the absence of a federal plan to help working families survive during this unprecedentedly difficult time, this New Jersey legislation is a welcome undertaking. Let me know if you need more information from me. Thank you. Hi, my name is Maya Aronoff. I've lived here 6 years and I'm a part of Princeton Mutual Aid and Unidad Latina. I support the council's resolution to support A4034 because everyone deserves a safe place to live, and especially during a pandemic, but always, we need to keep folks housed. This is also why we need the town fund to support folks who can't make rent or mortgage payments during the pandemic. So thank you for this resolution. I would challenge the council to think about how other broader policies in town contribute less obviously to displacement, whether it is policies that enabled the gentrification of the Witherspoon-Jackson community, unsafe conditions for renters, or policies that fail to distribute wealth in a very socially stratified town. Hopefully, we can also think about ways to prevent displacement, especially with low-income renters, and make sure everybody in town can afford safe and comfortable housing with their families. And I just want to end with a thank you to Maria Hugo for bringing this, at least to my attention. Maybe other people knew about it, but thank you.
Great. Thanks, Eve. Thanks for that reading. And thanks for everybody who sent in comments too. We really appreciate it. Are there any other comments from council? And if not, oh, go ahead. Sorry, Mr. Williamson. Go ahead, Councilman Williamson.
Just want to reiterate what Eve said. I want to thank all the members of the Affordable Housing Board who contributed to this in particular, and in particular, Maria Huega, who really did a great job advocating for this. Thank you.
Great, thanks. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
Okay, the resolution passes, and we'll send these comments to our representatives in the state. And also, I would just say that individual residents can also reach out directly to our state representatives too, if you're interested. Okay, now we come to the rest of the consent agenda, which contains items of a routine nature passed by single vote. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda? Moved by Mr. Cohen, seconded by Ms. Niedergang. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, the consent agenda passes unanimously. And now is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Cohen and seconded, I think, by Ms. Pearl-Lambros, who's very fast, second. All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, so meeting is adjourned. And thank you, everybody, for tuning in tonight.
Thank you. Good night.
Everybody. Bye.
Aye.
Night, everyone.
Good night.